Chapter 4098. Haha, such a small matter is not worth mentioning. Those people from the Snow Sword School treated you too like that. Do you think I should be nice to them? Kai Zhongyang said with a smile. However, his gaze soon stopped on Sydney. He said in surprise, Lady Sydney was only at the peak of Heaven Realm before. It hasn't even been half a day, and you've already reached Foundation Establishment? You're truly a heaven-sent genius. Congratulations. Elder Kai is too kind. This is all thanks to Lin. Without his guidance and the Foundation Establishment pills, I wouldn't even be able to reach Foundation Establishment, let alone succeed, Sydney explained. Haha, you two are not ordinary people. So don't be too modest. Kai Zhongyang nodded with a smile. Since Lin Yi was Hong Zhong's friend, it was not strange at all that he had Foundation Establishment pills. After a pause, Kai Zhongyang continued, When I was at the door, I heard you two mention the mental cultivation method of the Snow Sword School. Are you two troubled by this? That's right. Lin Yi and Sydney looked at each other. From what they had seen before, this vice shopkeeper was someone they could rely on. There was no need to hide it from him. In that case, please wait a moment. I'll be back soon. Kai Zhongyang smiled mysteriously. He turned and left the room, leaving Lin Yi and Sydney looking at each other. After a while, Kai Zhongyang returned with a simple but exquisite scroll. He smiled and handed it to Lin Yi. This is? Lin Yi took it and opened it. His eyelids twitched and he said in surprise, Snow Sword Mental Cultivation Method? Elder Kai, why do you have this? He was just thinking about how to get his hands on the Snow Sword School's mental cultivation method, and Kai Zhongyang just turned around and gave it to him. He was just about to doze off when someone sent him a pillow. Kai Zhongyang laughed. Master Lin, have you forgotten? My Shifu is a Dan god. Even the heads of these sects, including the Snow Sword School, have to be humble when they ask for my Shifu's help. My Shifu owns the 5 elements commerce, and he doesn't lack spirit jade. If you want him to concoct pills, you'll have to exchange rare resources. Other than those rare treasures, the rest are the mental cultivation methods of the sections. Lin Yi was secretly speechless. The sect masters of Middle Island's sects, which one of them wasn't a ruthless character who could shake the world with a stomp of their feet? In the end, they all had to be so humble in front of his cheap master. It could be seen that when one's alchemy skills reached the level of the pill god, they could eat both big and small. But, no matter what, this mental cultivation method was the top secret of the sects, and it wasn't easy for Zhang Liju to get it. He didn't believe that the Snow Sword School didn't have any other treasures, and the only reason was that Zhang Liju wanted this. Kai Zhongyang continued, My Shifu came back a while ago, and he gave me some of the rare treasures he got in recent years. He asked me to be in charge of these rare resources and prepare for the upcoming Middle Island Auction Festival. Middle Island Auction Festival? Lin Yi paused. In his mind, he couldn't help but think of the 4 Islands Auction Festival in the far North Island. Have you never heard of it, Master Lin? The so-called Central Island Auction Festival is a large-scale auction that all the chambers of commerce on the Central Island can participate in. It's officially organized by the Central Island Master and the Council of Elders. It's already the highest standard auction festival among the 5 great islands. Kai Zhongyang explained patiently, Every item in this auction is a rare treasure. My Shifu gave me this Snow Sword School mental cultivation method in preparation for this. I see. Lin Yi was fascinated by it. Any cultivator would be tempted by this kind of top auction where treasures gathered. However, he could only think about it for now. After all, he had to find a way to get back to the North Island, and he didn't know if he could make it in time. After a pause, Lin Yi suddenly pointed at the Snow Sword mental cultivation method in his hand and asked curiously, Elder Kai, since this was prepared for this, how are you going to auction it if you give it to me now? Kai Zhongyang looked at Lin Yi strangely and smiled. It won't spoil even if I look at it. You can just take a copy and give it back to me later, right? That works? Lin Yi and Sydney froze. Haha, the core mental cultivation method is the secret of each sect. Even if the Snow Sword School gave it to my master, they definitely won't allow anyone to copy it. Even if they win it in the auction, they won't allow anyone to copy it. That's the rule of the Jianghu. But rules are dead. Master Lin, you're Hong Zhong's friend. So of course I have to let you off the hook. Kai Zhongyang said with a sigh. Hong Zhong and I are friends who have gone through life and death together. We saved each other's lives when we were young, so how could we be restricted by these rules? Linny nodded. It turned out that the two of them were friends who had gone through life and death together. No wonder Kai Zhongyang was so protective of him. Indeed, it was just as he had said. Under normal circumstances, the core mental cultivation methods of the various sects were not allowed to be copied. Not only would the sects pursue this matter if it was spread out, but even if one did not consider this risk, no matter who had spent a huge price to bid for this mental cultivation method, they would definitely hide it. Others might not even be able to take a look at it, let alone copy it. If it weren't for this rule of the Jianghu, if it weren't for the fact that everyone was selfish and liked to keep it a secret, the cultivation methods of all the sects would have been passed down for hundreds and thousands of years, and they would have been spread all over the street. They would not be as rare as they were now. They would not be like the ordinary mental cultivation methods in the secular world in the North Island, which were everywhere. The truly profound mental cultivation methods were extremely rare. In that case, I won't stand on ceremony with you, Elder Kai, Linny said immediately. Although he didn't like to owe people favors, this snow sword mental cultivation method was very important to Sydney. Since Kai Zhongyang had already given it to him, there was no reason to refuse it. He could only think of a way to make it up to him in the future. What's more, apart from the relationship with Hong Zhong, he and Kai Zhongyang had another closer relationship, which was that they were fellow disciples of the same sect. Even if it wasn't time for them to recognize each other, there was no need to be too polite. He handed the snow sword mental cultivation method to Sydney and asked her to copy it on the side. Linny and Kai Zhongyang prepared a table of good dishes and wine, and sat together to chat. Although there was a huge age gap between them, they were both masters of alchemy and had unique medical skills. Whatever they said was a common topic. For a while, they chatted happily. They regretted not meeting each other earlier and became real friends despite their age difference. Chapter 4099. If everything went according to plan, once he reunited with Zhang Liju, this cheap master of his would become his biggest support on Sky-class Island. It wouldn't be a bad idea to know more about him before that. Although he had heard of Zhang Liju's legendary deeds from other people, those were mostly rumors passed down from mouth to mouth. It wasn't as reliable as the words of people close to him like Kai Zhongyang. Man, I'm just a disciple in name. I'm not a proud disciple. Kai Zhongyang shook his head with a smile. A disciple in name is still a proud disciple. Otherwise, why would he give you resources like the snow sword arts, Elder Kai? Could it be that Grandmaster Zhang has a lot of direct disciples? Linny probed. Direct disciples? Kai Zhongyang raised an eyebrow. Speaking of this, my master is quite unconventional. At his level, which of the other big shots didn't have disciples everywhere? Only my master is different. Not to mention direct disciples, he doesn't even have many disciples in name. He doesn't accept people easily. Oh, Grandmaster Zhang is such a legend, and he doesn't even have a direct disciple? Linny couldn't help but be curious. Only direct disciples could be the true inheritors of the legacy. Could it be that his cheap master had lost all hope and had even accepted something like a master's legacy? Speaking of this, my master did say something ambiguous before, saying that he should have a direct disciple in the common world. Kai Zhongyang suddenly said. Should? Linny paused. Kai Zhongyang smiled bitterly. That's what my master said, and us disciples were all confused. If he did, then he did. If he didn't, then he didn't. What did this should mean? But my master didn't say much, and we didn't ask. It's become an unsolved mystery in the Hall of Elixir now. At this point, Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know how he did it, but judging from Li Ju's words, he already knew that Lin Yi had received his inheritance in the common world. It was just that he couldn't confirm it before they met face to face. Lin Yi suddenly remembered. The people who came after Zhang Liju's tomb, could it be? Although he already understood, Lin Yi didn't show it on his face. Instead, he changed the subject. Elder Kai, you're the vice manager of 5 Elements Commerce. I wonder if you could help me get some heart-devouring exquisite grass and life-growing mushrooms? The life mushroom is a little more difficult, but the heart-devouring exquisite grass is not a problem. I will get someone to look in the warehouse. The Chamber of Commerce might not have it, but most of them are ready-made elixirs. However, the pill hall should have it. Kai Zhongyang was very straightforward and agreed without hesitation. Many thanks, Elder Kai. Linny said gratefully. He had only casually asked about the life mushroom, and the heart-devouring exquisite grass was naturally used to refine the foundation-building pill. This wasn't just for himself, more importantly, it was for Sydney. Linny himself was already at the peak of the late phase of foundation building, and he had just broken through not too long ago. He wouldn't be able to use it for a while. However, Sydney's strength was simply too weak. She didn't even have the ability to protect herself. If he didn't increase her strength as soon as possible, if anything were to happen in the future, it could easily lead to a tragedy. The Snow Sword practitioner's arts were already in place, and with the foundation building pill, with Snow Sword's talent, breaking through quickly shouldn't be a problem. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. The Snow Sword School had mobilized all of their forces to put Ling Yi and Sydney on the wanted list. However, it was as if the two had vanished from the face of the earth. Not only were they unable to find them, but there wasn't even a single report of them being seen. Logically speaking, since they had already given out a reward of 1,000 spirit jades, if someone saw it, they would definitely report it to the Snow Sword School. In the end, after 3 days, not even a single person had come. Helpless, the Snow Sword School could only give up for now. They were a huge school, especially in a place like the Middle Island, where dragons and tigers resided. They had all sorts of important matters to attend to every day. They couldn't possibly waste so much manpower for a mere servant girl who had eloped and escaped. As for Wei Shinjin, although he hated Ling Yi and Sydney to the bone, he didn't have the energy to look for them every day. He had already released the news of his wedding. If he continued to delay it, he would only become a laughing stock. Now that the arrow was already knocked on the bow, he had no choice but to marry Situ Qian. In any case, the invitation that he had sent out previously only stated that he, Wei Shinjin, was going to marry a Dao companion. However, it didn't specify who it was. It only said that she was a disciple of the Snow Sword School. Although Sydney had run away, the remaining Situ Qian just so happened to meet this condition and could take her place. Strictly speaking, Wei Shinjin didn't really like Situ Qian. It could only be said that she was a disciple of the Snow Sword School. Although Sydney had run away, the remaining Situ Qian just so happened to meet this condition and could take her place. But now, Wei Shinjin was forced to the point where he had no other choice. He could only use this method. The only thing that comforted him was that Situ Qian's conditions were not bad. Although she wasn't as pretty as Sydney, her appearance wasn't bad either. More importantly, Situ Qian had a strong background. In the Snow Sword School, Wei Shinjin's only backing was the Great Elder. Furthermore, they only had a slight relationship, which couldn't be compared to Situ Qian, the Great Elder's granddaughter. After marrying Situ Qian, not only would he be able to bring home a beauty, his position in the Snow Sword School would also rise. He would become a core disciple that was truly relied upon. It could be considered as killing 2 birds with 1 stone. As for Ling Yi and Sydney, no matter how unwilling Wei Shinjin was, he could only put them aside for the time being. It was impossible for the Snow Sword School to continue wasting so much manpower. The past 3 days had already proven that it was impossible to capture someone just by relying on the arrest warrant. If they wanted to obtain an immediate effect, they would have to invite the law enforcement hall of the Middle Island to make a public arrest. It was a pity that the influence of the Snow Sword School was not strong enough to do that. Young hero Lin, let me tell you a piece of good news. The arrest warrant from the Snow Sword School has been removed. Kai Zhongyang quickly brought this news to Lin Yi and Ling Yi. Really? That's great. Lin Yi and Sydney were instantly overjoyed. Even if this did not mean that the Snow Sword School had completely let them go, at least they could move around more freely in the future. They did not need to be cooped up in this room, unable to go out. Chapter 4100. After a pause, Kai Zhongyang said, "Oh, yes, young Master Lin. I've got the news about the heart-devouring exquisite grass you asked me to find. Although I haven't found it in the Chamber of Commerce or the Alchemy Hall, some trial teams have gone to collect it. They'll be back in a few days. Just wait patiently for a while." "Okay, thank you for your trouble, Elder Kai." Linny nodded happily. In the past 3 days, the thing that troubled him the most was how to arrange a place for Sydney in the future. He definitely couldn't go back to Snow Sword School, but it was unrealistic to ask Sydney to follow him back to the North Island. Even if Linny had a relationship with Shangguan Tianhua, it would be very difficult to arrange a place for Sydney to enter the 3 pavilions, especially when Shangguan Tianhua mistakenly thought that there was something going on between him and Shangguan Laner. If he suddenly brought back a super beauty, as Shangguan Laner's grandfather, no matter how open-minded he was, he might have to have a good talk with Linny about his life ideal. If it didn't work, he could only ask Ning Shuefei to find a way to take Shueli to the West Island. It was a gathering place for female cultivators. With the help of Ning Shuefei, the little princess, Shueli should have a good life there. However, this was the last resort. After all, if he wanted to do this, Linny had to take Sydney back to the North Island first. Not only would Shangguan Tianhua know, but the dangers they would encounter along the way were already a big problem that couldn't be solved. Sydney's current strength was really too weak. Moreover, when he took Sydney back, it was already unknown whether Ning Shuefei would still be in the North Island. After all, so many days had passed, and Ning Shuefei just came out to play with Shangguan Laner. It was unlikely that she would stay in the North Island all the time. After pondering for a while, Lin Yi suddenly had a flash of inspiration, and another familiar and beautiful face appeared in his mind, Tian Chan. Last time they parted in a hurry on the far North Island, Lin Yi didn't know how she was now. This unexpected trip to Middle Island was unexpected for Lin Yi, but since he was already here, he must find a way to see Tian Chan. Elder Kai, you're the vice manager of 5 Elements Commerce and Grandmaster Zhang's in-name disciple. You're a member of Nakajima's Hall of Alchemy. Do you know Tian Chan? She is also a disciple of the Pill Hall. Linny asked. Tian Chan? Young hero Lin, if you were to ask other normal Pill Hall disciples, this old man might not necessarily know them. After all, there are so many Pill Hall disciples, and this old man is always at the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce, so I don't spend much time there. However, this Tian Chan is an exception. Oh? Why is that? Lin Yi was puzzled. Hey, this old man knows her because there has been an uproar about something related to her recently. Everyone in the Middle Island Dan Hall, including the entire 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce, knows about it. So this old man has also heard of it. Kai Zhongyang said. What is it? Elder Kai, tell me quickly. Lin Yi's heart tightened as he asked quickly. Although Tian Chan was not as miserable as Shueli in Middle Island, she was still in a bad situation. She was alone, and no matter what happened, she would not be the one to benefit from it. It's a long story. The source has to start from the North Island. Kai Zhongyang immediately told Lin Yi everything he knew about Tian Chan. Finally, he sighed and said, this Tian Chan is also a girl with a hard life. She was forced to marry someone at such a young age. Heaven is really jealous of her beauty. Before he finished speaking, Kai Zhongyang's eyelids suddenly twitched. Then, he saw that Lin Yi's body suddenly emitted an extremely violent aura. He was puzzled and secretly shocked. If he wasn't wrong, Lin Yi's strength should only be at the peak of the late stage of foundation establishment. However, this aura, why did it feel like it was comparable to a beginner stage gold core expert? Zhang Dongjue, you old man. If I don't tear you into pieces in this life, I, Lin Yi, swear that I'm not a human. Lin Yi was so angry that the veins on his forehead bulged. He clenched his fists tightly and flew into a rage. With his personality, even if someone was stupid enough to provoke him, he would at most kill them. Normally, he wouldn't get angry at all, let alone lose control of his emotions like now. However, today, after hearing about Tian Chan's experience, Lin Yi completely lost control. This time, he accidentally came to Middle Island. First, he heard about Sydney's matter. Now, he learned about Tian Chan's miserable experience. How could Lin Yi not go berserk? Lin Yi, calm down first. Seeing this, Sydney quickly pulled him, for fear that he would lose control of his emotions and rush out. One must know that this was Middle Island, where experts gathered. Gold core experts were everywhere and foundation establishment experts were like dogs. Once Lin Yi lost control and went berserk, he would definitely be the one to suffer. Young hero Lin, why are you so agitated? Kai Zhongyang looked at Lin Yi's reaction and couldn't help but feel strange. Tian Shan is the same as me. When we were in the secular world, she and Lin Yi, Sydney had to explain with a blush. Although she didn't finish her words, Kai Zhongyang had already understood. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This Lin Yi was really a romantic person. When he was in the secular world, he had so many beauties. This Sydney in front of him was already a first-class super beauty. He heard that Tian Shan was the same. The words femme fatale were really not wrong at all, especially on Heaven Stage Island where the strong preyed on the weak. Whether it was Sydney or Tian Shan, the reason why they attracted so much trouble was because they were too beautiful. However, Kai Zhongyang suddenly thought of his master. In fact, it was the same. He brought Master Bing and Master Shui from the secular world, and it seemed to have caused quite a stir in the beginning. Kai Zhongyang pondered for a moment, then said to Lin Yi, "Young hero Lin, it's not impossible for you to meet Tian Shan. My senior and junior brothers are all in the pill hall. We are all Master's nominal disciples, and we take care of each other. I can ask them for help and let you meet Tian Shan, really?" Lin Yi's berserk aura stopped momentarily, and his mind slowly recovered from the rage. Kai Zhongyang nodded affirmatively and said, "But you have to promise me one thing first. You can't be impulsive. My master is not in the pill hall now, and Zheng Dongjue is the most powerful deputy hall master. He is the person with the most power in the pill hall. If you want to challenge him with your current strength, you are courting death. Even I can't help you." Lin Yi took a deep breath and lowered his head to calm down for a moment. Then, he nodded and agreed, "Okay, I will listen to Elder Kai." Chapter 4101. Well, in a few days, I will take the opportunity of preparing for the auction of Zhongdao to go back to Alchemy Hall. At that time, young hero Lin, you can pretend to be my attendant. What do you think? Kai Zhongyang suggested. "Thank you, old Kai." Lin Yi was grateful from the bottom of his heart. Just because they were friends, Kai Zhongyang was willing to help him so much. He must remember this kindness and favor. Although he still had to wait for a few more days, Lin Yi's heart was full of expectation at the moment. Even though he had met her last time in the far north island, after hearing what happened to Tian Shan recently, Lin Yi's mood to meet Tian Shan had become eager. As Lin Yi's woman, Sydney was not very jealous of this. Instead, she empathized with Tian Shan's experience. After all, wasn't she the same? She was the same, and so was Tian Shan. It seemed that the beautiful female cultivators from the secular world could not escape this disaster. She didn't know how Rock Candy was now. In the past, Shueli and Rock Candy were sworn enemies in the secular world. But now that she thought about it, the so-called grudge between them was nothing. Sydney couldn't help but ask, "By the way, Lin Yi, besides Tian Shan and me, who else did you find from the secular world?" She was too embarrassed to point out that it was Rock Candy, but Lin Yi understood what she meant. He shook his head and said, "I have no news of these confidants except you and Tian Shan. But as for others, Zhong Pingliang, Kong Mingming, and Dongfang Badeo were all transmitted to the North Island like me and joined the 3 pavilions of the North Island." "I see." Sydney couldn't help but be a little disappointed, but she still forced herself to comfort him. "It's okay. I believe they will all be fine. As long as you are here, we will all be together again." "Yes, I will." Lin Yi nodded heavily, but the worry in his heart still lingered. It was only now that he found out about Sydney and Tian Shan. Furthermore, they were not in a good situation. Heaven knew how Han Jingjing and the other girls were doing right now. If he wanted to find them, he had to raise his strength as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would not be able to move an inch no matter where he went. Middle Island Pill Hall. He came out of the room of the Will of Heaven. Tian Shan's expression was calm, but there was a hint of helplessness. After so long, the Will of Heaven was still the same as before, crazy and crazy. He still refused to admit himself. Now that things had come to this, Tian Shan no longer wished for the Heaven Path to acknowledge her. She only wished that she could do her best to take care of this elder who was related to her by blood. However, the Heaven Path would curse her every time they saw each other, and now it was only getting worse. What was she to do? At this moment, a figure flashed out from the darkness and stopped her. It was her brother-in-law in name, Zheng Tianchu. Sister-in-law, are you here to send medicine to Master Tian again? It's lonely to be alone. Let me accompany you next time. Zhang Tianchu's eyes glanced up and down at Tian Chan's exquisite body. Tian Chan frowned. There was a flash of disgust in her eyes. She didn't want to talk to him, but out of courtesy, she still endured the disgust and said, "No, I can do it alone. I don't know what else you want, young master." Zhang Tianchu didn't notice this. He took a step closer to Tian Chan and said with a frivolous smile, "I heard people say that Middle Island has not been peaceful recently. Recently, our Central Island has not been peaceful. 2 traitors escaped from the Snow Sword faction. One of them is a rapist. He has already taken away a female disciple of Snow Sword School. Sister-in-law, you have to be careful. Don't be tricked." "Thank you for your concern, but this is Middle Island Pill Hall. No matter how blind the rapist is, it is impossible for him to come to such a place." Tian Chan took a step back calmly. "Be that as it may, you still can't stop someone's lust. Especially with such a beautiful woman like you here, that rapist might get hot-headed and come over. As the saying goes, even if one were to die under a peony, he would still be a romantic even if he became a ghost." Zhang Tianchu's smile became more and more frivolous, and he took another step forward. The meaning of flirting was obvious. In addition, there was no one around. Tian Chan knew that if she continued to pester like this, the other party might have lustful thoughts and make a move. At that time, it would be difficult to deal with it. Tian Chan immediately turned cold and frowned. "Young master, you worry too much. If there is nothing else, please let me go. I have to go back first." "Oh, sister-in-law, don't be so anxious. Anyway, no one will accompany you when you go back. You are in the prime of your life. It is the time to have fun, but you stay alone in your room. Don't you think it is boring?" Zhang Tianchu did not give up. Not only did he not let her go, but he reached out to touch Tian Chan's face. Tian Chan quickly avoided and warned with a cold face, "Men and women should not touch each other. I am your sister-in-law. Young master, please behave yourself." "Sister-in-law, don't be so serious." Zhang Tianchu suddenly laughed and looked up and down at Tian Chan. His eyes were full of obscenity. He chattered on, "People say that women need a man's nourishment to stay young and beautiful. Although you are my sister-in-law and my cousin's woman, my cousin is dead now. He doesn't have the ability to nourish you. But now that I have inherited his position, I naturally have to fulfill the corresponding responsibility. What do you say, sister-in-law?" Such explicit and shameless words really made Tian Chan angry. When they first met, Zhang Tianchu was frivolous, but at least he still maintained the last bit of bottom line. But now, as her position in Zhang Dongjue's eyes was gradually consolidated, his behavior began to become more unscrupulous. After several encounters, Tian Chan had a deep understanding of Zhang Tianchu's shameless nature. The more she pestered him, the more excited he became, and the more he wanted to take a yard when given an inch. "Young master, does your grandfather know that you are doing this?" Tian Chan snorted coldly and immediately ignored him. She turned sideways and directly walked around him. "Humph, you still want to play chastity with me? Interesting, I want to see how long you can last." Looking at Tian Chan's graceful back, Zhang Tianchu's eyes suddenly flashed a trace of ruthlessness. Although he had always coveted his sister-in-law, his patience was always limited. Now, his patience was almost exhausted. A few days later, Lin Yi finally received the exact news from Kai Zhongyang. He had already discussed with the senior at the Dan Hall. Now that everything was ready, he could bring Lin Yi to see Tian Chan. Chapter 4102. This time, he showed up with his original appearance. After all, the appearance of Wu Fu with the 1,000 silk mask had been plastered all over the street. Although the Snow Sword faction had withdrawn the wanted order, there were too many people on the street. It was hard to guarantee that no one would notice him. It was better to show his original appearance. Anyway, no one in the Middle Island would be able to recognize him. The Middle Island Pill Hall was one of the top sects in Middle Island. Whether it was status or influence, it was an outstanding existence. This could be seen just from its geographical location. Middle Cauldron Mountain was located in the center of Middle Island. Not only did it represent the highest mountain in Middle Island, but its unique location and environment also nurtured a large number of legendary realm experts. According to records, the earliest batch of cultivators on Heaven Island settled down in Middle Cauldron Mountain. After thousands or even tens of thousands of years, the cultivation world on Heaven Island was prosperous. Middle Cauldron Mountain's high status on Heaven Island was undeniable. Settling down in Middle Cauldron Mountain not only meant that one could occupy coveted cultivation resources, but more importantly, it represented an unparalleled transcendental status on Middle Island. Even those powerful sects that could establish a foothold on Middle Island, including the Snow Sword faction, had never been able to reach the core area of Middle Cauldron Mountain. There were no more than 5 transcendental forces that could enter Middle Cauldron Mountain in the entire Heaven Island, and the Middle Island Pill Hall was one of them. Following Kai Zhongyang all the way to the entrance of the Middle Island Pill Hall, Lin Fan looked at the quaint, tranquil, and beautiful paradise inside, and then looked at the bustling scene outside. It was just a door away, but there was such a stark contrast. Even Lin Yi couldn't help but sigh when he saw it. This feeling of serenity in the midst of chaos reminded Lin Yi of a saying in the secular world. It was said that those who could live in a courtyard house in the core area of Yanjing were the big shots. The wonderful scene in front of him. Wasn't that the case before? The layout of the Middle Island Pill Hall was like a super villa with an exquisite structure. Other than a few large doors, there were quiet and elegant pavilions connected to each other at almost every location. They were all intertwined and looked magnificent. He passed through one door after another without any obstruction. However, there were no guards in sight. It was the complete opposite of what he had expected. Lin Yi couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Elder Kai, has the Nakajima Alchemy Hall always been like this? Why aren't there any guards? A place like the Pill Hall." Whether it was ready-made elixirs or elixir materials, they were all treasures that made people's hearts pound. No matter how famous the Middle Island Pill Hall was, in the face of benefits, it was hard to guarantee that people wouldn't take risks out of desperation. This was human nature, and it couldn't be stopped. Kai Zhongyang smiled and said, "Young hero Lin, there's something you don't know. Don't be fooled by the fact that we didn't see any guards along the way. This place is loose on the outside but tight on the inside. Those guards are just hiding in the dark. He just didn't want outsiders to see it. The security of our Pill Hall is second to none even in all of the 5 great islands of the Heaven Stage. The reason why they didn't come to interrogate you is because I got someone to specially inform them earlier." I see. Lin Yi finally understood. If the security was really as loose as it looked, then in the Heaven Stage Island where the strong preyed on the weak, the Middle Island Pill Hall wouldn't have such a high position today. Moments later, Lin Yi followed Kai Zhongyang to a small manor deep in the core. Compared to the outside, the environment here was better, and there were very few people. There wasn't even a normal disciple passing by. Seeing that Lin Yi was curious, Kai Zhongyang turned around and introduced, "This garden is an area specially reserved for the disciples under our master. Other normal disciples don't have the right to enter or exit here. Even the vice head has to inform us if he wants to enter or exit here." Lin Yi nodded. Zhang Liju was the one who created the Middle Island Pill Hall, and it wasn't strange for his disciples to have this privilege. At this time, a young man walked over and smiled at the two. "Brother Kai, you guys are here. Is this the Lin Yi you told me about?" Lin Yi turned around and looked at Kai Zhongyang. He smiled and nodded. "That's right. This is Lin Yi. Young hero Lin. This is Ho Guanqi. He's the same as me, a disciple under Master's name. But don't look at him just because he looks young. He's our big disciple. Be it talent or strength, he's the highest among us, and the one that Master values the most." "I'm Lin Yi. Nice to meet you, Senior Ho," Lin Yi quickly greeted. The guy looked so young, and it felt weird to call him Elder Ho. He might not like it, but he couldn't call him Big Disciple directly. He could only call him Senior for now. "Haha, Lin Yi, don't be nervous. I've known Hong Zhong for a long time, and I've heard about your situation from Kai Zhongyang. I'll do my best to help." Ho Guanqi had a friendly smile on his face as he patted Lin Yi's shoulder. "That's right. I was able to bring you here successfully because of Big Disciple Ho's help. Otherwise, even I wouldn't be able to bring people back so casually. After all, this is an important place for the Pill Hall. Unless it's a disciple of our sect, outsiders aren't allowed to enter. Kai Zhongyang explained. Thank you, Senior Ho, Linny said gratefully. Then, he couldn't contain the excitement in his heart and asked impatiently, when can I see Tian Shan? Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other and smiled. Then, he said to Lin Yi, my friend, you're really infatuated. Don't worry, I promise that you'll get what you want. However, we need to keep this a secret. We can't go to Tian Shan directly. We need to find a compromise. A compromise? Linny was slightly stunned. He knew that if he went to see Tian Shan directly, it would be easy for people to notice him. With Tian Shan's current sensitive identity, it wouldn't be good for her. That's right. I've heard of something that can be put to use. Ho Guanqi nodded and said, I've heard that Tian Shan has been visiting Elder Tian a lot lately. Every few days, she would go there. So, if we spread the word that we found an alchemist to treat Elder Tian, people won't care about it. But if Tian Shan hears about it, she'll definitely go there. That's right. Let Tian Shan take the initiative to go over. It's better than us looking for her. That way, young hero Lin, you and Tian Shan will only have a chance encounter and won't be noticed by others. Kai Zhongyang agreed. Chapter 4103. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other and sighed. The Elder Tian we're talking about was the former Vice Island Master of Middle Island, the Will of Heaven. He was also a legendary figure, but because he cultivated the Heaven's Fortune battle art, he went berserk, and his meridians were all broken. He became a cripple. Ah, it's him? Lin Yi was stunned. He remembered that Chancellor Nan Tian had mentioned this person in the secular world. It seems like you've heard of him. Elder Tian has a close relationship with our master. Since then, he has been staying in the Pill Hall to recuperate. Unfortunately, there has been no effect. Part of the reason why Master has been missing all these years is to find a way to treat him. When Master isn't around, us brothers and sisters take care of him. Ho Guanqi explained. Kai Zhongyang continued. That's why we had young hero Lin meet Tian Shan this time. Actually, we're using Elder Tian as a cover. Anyway, we've already invited doctors from outside to come in and treat Elder Tian, so no one will suspect anything. Thank you for the trouble. When do we go? Linny asked. Ho Guanqi chuckled and said, since little friend is so impatient, you can go over right now. Either way, I've already arranged for people ahead of time. The news will soon reach Tian Shan's ears. I believe she won't just sit and watch. After the three of them discussed, they immediately set off for the private recuperation place specially prepared for the Will of Heaven. Although Linny was a little curious as to why Tian Shan was taking care of Elder Tian, he thought that it was probably a task assigned by the Pill Hall. Entering the room, he saw an old man with an imposing figure. He was in good spirits, and he could vaguely feel a trace of the heroic spirit he had in the past. However, between his brows, there was a lingering sense of helplessness and dejection. This was the first time Lin Yi saw the Will of Heaven, the legendary figure of Sky-class Island. He was now a cripple, and in terms of strength, he might not even be a match for a normal person. However, a legend was still a legend. No matter how poor he was now, he wouldn't truly be ordinary. Seeing the three enter, the Will of Heaven didn't speak as harshly as he did to Tian Shan. Instead, he smiled calmly. Oh, it's Ho and Kai. Did you two bring me some elixir again? Or did you think of some other method? All these years, it wasn't just Zhang Liju, Ho Guanqi, and the other disciples didn't give up. They were always looking for a way to cure the disease, bringing back some rare herbs from time to time, but it was useless every time. No, actually, the two of us invited a medicine master to take a look at you, Elder Sky. It's Lin Yi, our little friend. Ho Guanqi forced himself to explain. The Will of Heaven? When Tianqing heard this, his gaze fell on Lin Yi. He was a little surprised. This apothecary was a little too young, wasn't he? Although when one's strength reached a certain level, they wouldn't age. To an experienced person, even if it was just from a person's temperament, they would be able to determine the person's true age. He could also determine this person's true age. As a legendary figure in the past, Tian Xing naturally did not lack this little bit of insight. However, although he could tell that Lin Yi was young, the will of heaven didn't underestimate him at all. After all, age and strength weren't necessarily proportional. Some people were young, but they were geniuses. Their achievements in just a few years were something others wouldn't be able to achieve even if they spent hundreds or thousands of years. For example, he and Zhang Liju were both living examples. Plus, other than being an elixir god, Zhang Liju also had the identity of a medical saint. His disciples were all extraordinary as well. For example, Kai Zhongyang was a famous medical master in Zhongdao. This young elixir master in front of him was able to get their approval. He was probably not a simple person. This Lin Yi seemed to be quite capable. Then I'll have to trouble Elixir Lin. Please. The will of heaven politely invited Lin Yi to sit at the side. Looking at the will of heaven's expectant face, Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other helplessly. Although they were here to help Lin Yi, they were actually using the will of heaven to trick people. Lin Yi wasn't an elixir master at all. He was just using this identity to make it easier for him to meet Tian Shan, Elder Tian. Actually, Hou Guanqi was about to confess the truth to the will of heaven when suddenly, footsteps came from outside the door. A moment later, Tian Shan appeared at the door with a face full of concern. Behind her was Zhang Tianchu, who refused to leave like a ghost. Everyone was surprised. It was expected that Tian Shan would be attracted here, but what was with this Zhang Tianchu? Why was he here? Finally seeing Tian Shan, Lin Yi was delighted. At the same time, he was also puzzled. Who was this guy following behind her? His eyes were filled with lust. One look, and you could tell that he wasn't a good person. On the other side, Tian Shan's body shook as soon as she saw Lin Yi. She was also overjoyed, and it took a lot of effort for her not to show any strange expression. After all, Zhang Tianchu was following behind her, and if he knew about her relationship with Lin Yi, it would be big trouble. What are you doing here? Before everyone spoke, the will of heaven had already shouted at Tian Shan. I have told you many times, don't come to see me. You are not welcome here. If it was in the past, Tian Shan might have retreated, but now that she suddenly saw Lin Yi, she immediately understood that the other party must have used this reason to see her and would not leave at this time. Senior, Chan just wants to see you and do my best. Tian Shan immediately turned to Zhang Tianchu and said with a faint expression, Thank you for sending me off. I will go in to see the elder Tian. You can go back. Zhang Tianchu suddenly became anxious and quickly said, Don't. There are so many people here, and there is a stranger I have never seen before. What if it is that? What if I told you about the flower thief before? After a pause, Zhang Tianchu immediately stared at Lin Yi with an evil face and asked, Who are you? You are not a disciple of Dan Hall, right? How did you sneak in here? Hurry up and tell me the truth. Before Lin Yi could speak, Hou Guanqi frowned and replied in a cold voice, This is the pharmacist we invited to diagnose the elder Tian. Zhang Tianchu, this is a major event related to the recovery of the elder Tian. Can you afford to offend the pharmacist? Don't forget that as a disciple of the Pill Hall, I also know medicine. If he really is an expert in medicine, then so be it. If he isn't, I'll be able to tell at a glance. Humph humph. Zhang Tianchu sneered and threatened. As he had always coveted Tian Shan, he could quickly detect any abnormal reaction from Tian Shan. His intuition told him that his sister-in-law seemed to have some inexplicable feelings towards this medicine master who popped out of nowhere. So today, he must keep a close eye on this person. When Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang saw this, they couldn't help but feel anxious in their hearts. If they allowed Zhang Tianchu to stand here, not only would it affect Lin Yi and Tian Chan's meeting, more importantly, Lin Yi's identity as a medicine master would be exposed immediately. Once this matter got out of hand, even if they were Zhang Liju's disciples, it would be hard for them to protect Lin Yi. After all, their master Zhang Liju wasn't here, and the Pill Hall was under the Vice Hall Master Zheng Dongju's control. These disciples only had a high position, but they didn't have enough power to go against Zhang Dongjue. Moreover, if they were to really talk about this matter, they were the ones at fault first. At this moment, Linny looked at Zheng Tianchu indifferently and said with a normal expression, "Is this the way your pill hall treats your guests? I was invited here to treat the will of heaven, not to be wronged. This person doesn't seem to welcome me." Ho Guanqi's eyes lit up, and he immediately scolded, "Zheng Tianchu, did you hear that? Why aren't you leaving now?" Zheng Tianchu was furious when he heard this. As the grandson of Zheng Dongjue, his position in the pill hall was like the sun in the sky. He had never been scolded like this before. He pointed at the crowd and said, "You, how dare you?" Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Ho Guanqi. "I'll ask you one more time. Are you going to leave or not? Treating Elder Tian's injury is something my master Dan God ordered. You're trying to disobey my master's order and betray the pill hall?" When the word betray came out, Zheng Tianchu couldn't help but shiver. With such a big accusation on him, no matter how strong his background was, he would still die. You. Zheng Tianchu gritted his teeth in anger, but under the stare of the two disciples of Zhang Liju, Ho Guanqi and Cai Zhongyang, he didn't dare to be tough anymore. He could only snort coldly and angrily, "Fine, then I'll wait at the door. I'd like to see how you're going to clean up this mess. Sister-in-law, come with me." Zheng Tianchu was still worried about Tianchan, and he reached out to hold her hand. However, Tianchan nimbly dodged it and said indifferently, "No need, I'll stay here." Zheng Tianchu didn't dare to use force in front of everyone. Helplessly, he could only walk out the door alone. In the room, Ho Guanqi and Cai Zhongyang could only look at each other and smile bitterly. Although Zheng Tianchu had been driven out, this guy would definitely be guarding the door like a haunting ghost. The paper could not wrap up the fire, and when the time came, he would still be exposed. The two of them did not know what to do for a while. At this moment, Linny sat beside Tianqing calmly and gestured for him to extend his hand. Then, Linny started to feel Tianqing's pulse. He was acting like a doctor who had achieved the Tao. Tianchan couldn't help but be surprised. Since when did Lin Yi become a medicine master, and was even invited by Ho Guanqi and Cai Zhongyang to treat the will of heaven? However, being surprised was just being surprised. Tianchan still had confidence in Lin Yi. She knew that Lin Yi's medical skills were superb when they were in the common world. Even if he couldn't completely cure the will of heaven, he should be able to diagnose something. Ho Guanqi and Cai Zhongyang, on the other hand, didn't know anything about this. They thought that Lin Yi was just putting on a show, and their expressions froze. Chapter 4105. Cai Zhongyang shrugged helplessly. After interacting with Lin Yi for the past few days, he felt that although the guy was young, he was reliable. Otherwise, the two wouldn't have become good friends. He really didn't expect things to turn out this way. It couldn't be helped. Since Lin Yi didn't want to say it, Cai Zhongyang felt like he had to force himself to say it for him. This was better than being exposed and being discovered by the Sky Elder himself. With all the effort they'd put into helping the Sky Elder all these years, he believed that the Sky Elder would be disappointed at most and wouldn't pursue the matter too much. Cai Zhongyang knew that Zheng Tianchu was guarding outside the door, and so he secretly used his strength to create an artificial barrier. It was invisible and hard to detect, but if one paid close attention, they would realize that standing at the door, they wouldn't be able to hear the sound inside the room. It had been blocked. Of course, this was only effective against Zheng Tianchu. It wouldn't have any effect on higher-level masters. Immediately, Cai Zhongyang was ready to confess to the Sky Elder, but Lin Yi had already finished taking his pulse. He concluded with a surprised expression, "Sky Elder, your injuries? Not only are all the meridians in your body completely shattered, even the original meridians are starting to blur. This is really unprecedented. Even gods can't heal you." Everyone froze at the same time. Ho Guanqi and Cai Zhongyang looked at each other, stunned. So this Lin Yi wasn't just putting on an act, he really did have some skills. Indeed, it was as Lin Yi said, the root cause of the Sky Elder's injuries was this: the shattered meridians. Different from Si Haixiao's broken meridians, even a miracle medicine like the meridian opening elixir wouldn't have any effect. This was the reason why Zhang Liju and the other disciples couldn't do anything about it. There was only one way to truly heal him, and that was to reconnect the broken meridians in his body bit by bit. This was an action that defied the laws of nature. Even Zhang Liju, who was known as the medical saint, didn't have such a terrifying ability. None of them had such a terrifying ability, and it was precisely because of this that the will of heaven's injuries had dragged on until now, leaving them helpless. After listening to Lin Yi's words, the will of heaven's heart sank. A trace of disappointment flashed across his eyes as he smiled bitterly. Even the gods can't cure it. This means that there's no cure at all. Tian Shan looked at Lin Yi. At the same time, he couldn't help but pray and desire. She also knew that if this kind of thing could be cured, then it could be cured. If it couldn't be cured, then it couldn't be cured. However, the will of heaven was an elder who was related to her by blood. She really couldn't bear to see him so helpless and depressed. Unexpectedly, Linny shook his head and said with a smile, "That's not entirely true. Immortals are not omnipotent. There are things that immortals can't do. It's not necessarily impossible for us mortals." Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang couldn't help but look at each other. Their hearts that had just calmed down were instantly on tenterhooks for Linny again. This was too big of a statement. How could he possibly have a way to deal with something that even his own master was helpless about? This little friend of his was really worrisome. The will of heaven's eyes lit up like a drowning man who had grabbed onto the last life-saving straw. He stared at Lin Yi and asked, "Could it be that you have a way to cure my injuries?" After waiting helplessly and desperately for so long, he wasn't afraid of Lin Yi bragging. Lin Yi didn't even dare to boast, not even daring to give it a try. That'd be the end of all hope. Lin Yi smiled faintly. To be honest, with Elder Tian's injuries, anyone else wouldn't have been able to hold on much longer. But a legend is a legend, after all. Elder Tian is so energetic right now. It can be said that he's protecting your last chance of recovery. I can't say that I can completely cure you, but I'm willing to try. Lin Yi, little friend. This concerns Elder Tian's life. This isn't a child's play. You have to think this through. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang quickly reminded him. Lin Yi's words were so convincing, but they still found it hard to believe it wasn't because they looked down on Lin Yi, but because they cared for him. After all, even the holy Dr. Zhang Liju couldn't do anything, and a little kid like Lin Yi said that he could. That was too much of an exaggeration. However, the will of heaven interrupted the two. "It's fine, Alchemist Lin. Go ahead and try. No matter what the result is, I believe it won't be worse than my current state. I will only be grateful and not blame you." "All right then, let's start now." With that, Lin Yi grabbed his wrist and channeled the art of dragon mastery, starting the healing process. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang were puzzled. What kind of healing method was this? Why did it look like he was checking the injury and not healing it? But seeing the solemn expression on Elder Tian's face, they didn't dare disturb himself. They could only watch worriedly from the sidelines. The only thing they could do now was to protect the two. Time passed bit by bit, and after a full 2 hours, Lin Yi slowly retracted his qi, the healing process finally coming to an end. "Elder Tian, how do you feel?" Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang quickly asked. After sensing the situation in his body, Tian Xing's face suddenly filled with extreme shock. He looked at his right arm in disbelief and paled in shock. "The meridians in my arm have actually recovered? Really?" When Ho and Guanqi heard this, they were instantly shocked. However, they didn't need him to answer before they knew that Tian Xing's words were absolutely true, because they noticed to their shock that the spiritual energy in the room had actually started to surge towards Tian Xing's right arm. As a legendary figure in Nakajima, the will of heaven's strength was undeniable, and he could control the qi in the air with a single thought. This was a skill that ordinary people couldn't comprehend, but it was a piece of cake for him. Of course, there was a prerequisite for this, and that was the recovery of his meridians. "Elder Tian, you've really recovered?" Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang, on the other hand, looked at Lin Yi as if they were looking at a monster. Treating the will of heaven was originally just an excuse, but they didn't think that it would turn out to be real. What was even more surprising was that the incurable disease that even their master Zhang Liju couldn't do anything about was actually cured by Lin Yi. The two couldn't help but think that this Lin Yi couldn't be some legendary figure in disguise, could he? Chapter 4106. Reconnect the meridians in my right arm? Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang were both stunned. Then, they heard the will of heaven say excitedly, Medicine Master Lin is truly a genius. Even if you only helped me reconnect the meridians in my right arm, it is already unimaginable. I cannot thank you enough, and I will remember it. You're too kind. This is the duty of a doctor. Lin Yi smiled faintly. In fact, if he really wanted to use his full strength, he could completely heal the other party. He just wanted to avoid shocking the world. So he was just testing his skills and healing a part of the other party's meridians. Even so, Lin Yi's image in everyone's eyes had suddenly become unfathomable. The will of heaven was extremely grateful. As for Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang, they did not dare to treat Lin Yi as an ordinary junior anymore. Looking at this scene, Tian Shan was sincerely happy for Lin Yi and the will of heaven. One was the man she entrusted her life to. The other was a senior who was related to her by blood. Other than the will of heaven, she was the most excited person in her heart. However, she did not dare to show it too much. My friend, Lin Yi, how did you do it? Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang were impatient and could not help but ask it curiously. They were all divine doctors, and it was impossible for them not to feel an itch in their hearts when it came to healing the broken meridians, which was a nearly heaven-defying method. Seniors, you don't have to be curious. The reason why I can do this is because my mental cultivation method is a little special. Lin Yi smiled and then made a request. However, I hope that everyone can keep this method of treatment a secret. If you tell others, just say that acupuncture and medicinal pills are the treatment. My friend, Lin Yi, don't worry. This is the top secret of our pill hall. Even if you don't say it, we will pay attention to it. Moreover, we won't tell others, and no one will dare to ask us about it. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang guaranteed. That's good. Lin Yi nodded. This was related to the will of heaven, the former deputy master of Middle Island. Even if there was a slight leak, it would inevitably attract the attention of many big shots of Middle Island, even if one of them had ill intentions towards him. That would be a huge trouble. As the few of them were talking, Zhang Tianchu finally couldn't help but push open the door. Immediately after, he saw Tian Xing's right arm condensing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. He was so shocked that his jaw dropped. Kai Zhongyang removed the barrier without a trace and sneered at Zhang Tianchu. What do you think? Now, heaven has recovered an arm. Is this apothecary we invited a swindler? Zhang Tianchu was speechless for a long time. Even if his medical skills were not as good as those present, but he grew up in the pill hall. Under the influence of what he saw and heard, his eyesight was still far above ordinary people. To be able to cure the will of heaven, even if it was just an arm, was definitely an incredible thing. If he still insisted that the other party was a swindler, then not only him, even his grandfather Zhang Dongjue, the deputy hall master of the pill hall, could not even compare to a swindler. He couldn't even compare to a swindler, so he could only go to the streets to beg. The truth was right in front of him. No matter how arrogant Zhang Tianchu was, he did not dare to fart anymore. He could only force himself to ignore everyone and said to Tian Shan, Sister-in-law, you have seen heaven. Elder Tian, you've already seen it. Hurry up and follow me. Tian Shan shook her head decisively. No, heaven has just recovered a little. Elder Sky has only just recovered a little. I have to stay behind to take care of him. You. Zhang Tianchu still wanted to forcefully pull Tian Shan away. However, under the intense stares of Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang, especially at this moment, even the will of heaven was looking at him with hostility. This was a legendary figure who could be mentioned in the same breath as the pill god Zhang Liju. If he was at his peak, even his grandfather Zhang Dongjue could only look up to him. The situation was stronger than the person. Zhang Tianchu did not dare to act rashly again. He could only snort coldly and leave alone. After finally chasing this annoying dog skin plaster away, Ho Guanqi turned to Lin Yi and smiled. The annoying guy is gone. Linny, little friend, if you have anything to say, you can say it now. Linny nodded and immediately walked over and reached out to hold Tian-chan. However, before he could speak, the will of heaven was shocked and his face changed. When he saw that both Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang did not look surprised, he couldn't help but be surprised. Alchemist Lin, don't think that you can be like Zheng Tianchu and tease the Tian clan just because you cured me. The will of heaven was furious. Even if he had just recovered his right arm, he could already control part of the spiritual energy around him. He immediately pressed down on Lin Yi with a monstrous force. Lin Yi was stunned when he heard this. While resisting the coercion of the other party, his eyes turned back and forth between the will of heaven and Tian-chan. He said with incredible surprise, Tian-chan, is this elder heaven from your family? However, Tian-chan did not immediately explain to him. Instead, she looked at the will of heaven with surprise and joy and said happily, Elder heaven, you finally recognize me? The will of heaven sighed and looked at Tian-chan with a much gentler and kind gaze. He said, I am not a cold-hearted person. You have been caring for me for so long. How could I not see it? Moreover, my ancestors did move here from the heavenly elixir sect in the secular world. It was just that I never told anyone else. The reason why I didn't recognize you before was because I was a useless person. There was no need to claim kinship with you. What's there to recognize a disgusting, disabled person? But now, I have hope of recovery. Of course, I can recognize you. That's great. Chan-er was afraid that you would never recognize me. I have wanted to hear these words even in my dreams. Now, my wish has finally come true. Tian-chan was both wronged and happy as she shed tears. You silly child. The will of heaven was also touched. As the saying goes, a friend in need is a friend indeed. When he was at his lowest and most desperate, Tian-chan's concern was tantamount to sending charcoal in snowy weather. This was the true blood kinship that could not be cut off. The two finally recognized each other. However, Hou Guanqi and the others on the side were confused. Instead, Linny heard some of the story from the will of heaven's words and asked, Xiao Chan, is Elder Heaven of the same lineage as the Tian clan in the secular world? Chapter 4107. Immediately, Tian-chan blushed and introduced to the will of heaven. Don't be angry, Tian-chan and he were all ready. Without finishing her words, the will of heaven naturally understood what Tian-chan meant, and he was stunned. Ah? You actually have this kind of relationship with Tian-chan, and you came up from the secular world together? Lin Yi was also surprised. I didn't expect that Tian-chan is actually a relative of Tian-chan. After the misunderstanding was solved, the will of heaven immediately dispersed his aura. Looking at Lin Yi's young face, he sighed. It's really true that the new generation excels the old. Lin Yi, your medical skills are already so brilliant at such a young age. It's really incredible. If I'm not wrong, you can actually cure me completely, but out of caution, you held back just now, right? As soon as these words came out, Hou Guanqi and others were even more surprised. In their opinion, it was already very amazing that Lin Yi could cure the will of heaven's right arm, but he still held back? Under the gaze of everyone, Lin Yi couldn't lie, so he had to nod awkwardly. If he had known that the will of heaven was Tian-chan's relative, he wouldn't have held back so deliberately. Seeing this, everyone was even more shocked. Even Tianqing himself felt that it was unbelievable. He was just testing the waters. In theory, if Lin Yi could help him heal the meridians in his right arm, then naturally, he could heal the meridians in other parts of his body. But theory was theory. To actually achieve it, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Without saying much, Lin Yi immediately began to heal the will of heaven again. After all, he was already on the same side, so he didn't have to worry too much, and there was no need to hide so much. This time, Lin Yi didn't hold back anymore. It lasted for a full 8 hours, and it was not until the sky was almost dark that he finally succeeded. Feeling the new meridians in his body, the will of heaven was so shocked that he could not move. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth that he had instantly absorbed was transformed into genuine chi that flowed through his meridians. This kind of familiar feeling that he had not felt for a long time simply made him, a former legendary master, unable to extricate himself. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang were shocked speechless. Even his master, Zhang Liju, didn't have this kind of heaven-defying ability. Seniors, could I trouble you to examine Elder Tian and see if there are any hidden dangers in his body? Linny asked. It wasn't that he was being humble, although it seemed like there was no problem anymore. However, with Elder Celestial's previous level of strength, there might still be some undetectable side effects. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang were both medical masters with great experience, so they were suitable to help with the follow-up examination. Okay, Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang nodded. They were curious, and this kind of thing was something they couldn't refuse. While the two were giving the will of heaven a full examination, Lin Yi stood on the side and chatted with Tian Chan. He carefully learned about everything that had happened to Tian Chan recently. The result made Lin Yi both happy and annoyed. The happy thing was, although Tian Chan was forced into a ghost marriage, she didn't suffer any actual harm. Instead, she had an extra layer of protection. What annoyed him was that Zheng Dongjue and Zheng Tianchu were simply looking for death, especially Zheng Tianchu. This scum was obviously trying to get his hands on Tian Chan, and this was intolerable. He had to find a chance in the future to nip this thread in the bud. While they were talking, Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang had finished the examination of the will of heaven, and they exclaimed, "My friend Lin Yi, your medical skills are really amazing. The meridians in Elder Celestial's body are no different from those of ordinary people. It's just that he was injured for a long time, and his body is still not used to it. As long as he has a good rest for a while, he should be able to recover." "That's good. I was afraid that there would be some side effects." Lin Yi nodded and smiled. Ho Guanqi looked up at the sky outside and said to the will of heaven and Lin Yi, "Elder Celestial, it's getting late. Junior brother Kai and I have to go back to discuss the auction in Zhongdao, so we won't stay here for long. We'll see you tomorrow." Then, Chan will go back first. "Elder Celestial, have a good rest," Tian Chan also said. After all, she was the daughter-in-law of the Zheng family, so she couldn't spend the night outside. "Okay, then I won't see you out." The will of heaven nodded, and then turned to Lin Yi and said, "Anyway, I live alone. How about you stay here for one night, Lin Yi, and chat with me?" Lin Yi was stunned. Since Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang still had business to discuss and didn't have time to arrange for him, he might as well stay here for one night. He immediately agreed and said, "Okay, then I'll bother you." Tian Xing laughed and said, "You are my great benefactor who has given me a new lease of life. To be willing to accompany an old man like me for a while is something I can't even beg for. What's there to be bothered about?" Everyone looked at each other and smiled. Lin Yi sent them out on behalf of the will of heaven. Before leaving, Tian Chan reluctantly hugged Lin Yi in his arms for a long time, and then they separated, saying that they would meet again the next morning. Back in the room, Lin Yi and the will of heaven sat opposite each other and chatted like old friends. Although the will of heaven had just recovered from his serious injury, he was in a good mood and was in the mood to talk. After so many years of illness, he was suddenly cured, and it was the time to share the joy. Chapter 4108. His words were flat, but Lin Yi couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. There were very few people who could do this even though they knew it was impossible. It could only be said that there was a reason why Tianqing was able to become a legend of his generation. Gradually, I found that although the progress of the creation battle art was slow, my strength was extremely strong. I was invincible at the same level and could even kill opponents at a higher level. When I broke through to the nascent soul stage, I was recognized as the strongest nascent soul stage master on Heavenly Island. Because I had the strength to kill opponents at a higher level, I finally became the Vice Island Master of Middle Island. For a time, I was very famous. The will of heaven narrated without joy or sorrow. Since the creation battle art is so powerful, then, Elder Heaven, how did you end up like this? Lin Yi couldn't help but ask curiously. The will of heaven shook his head. Although I had become the strongest nascent soul stage master at that time, there was still a higher stage above the nascent soul stage. Of course, I was not willing to stop like this. However, when I was ready to break through to the nascent soul stage, I found that I couldn't cultivate anymore. At the nascent soul stage, besides me, no one else practiced the creation battle art, so there was no precedent to follow. I could only rely on my own strength to break through, but in the process of breaking through, my meridians were all broken. After listening to this, Lin Yi suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. He was also practicing the creation battle art, and it was the same experience as the will of heaven. He could kill opponents at a higher level, easily and happily. According to what the will of heaven said, when he broke through to the nascent soul stage, he would also end up like this? Although he was still far from the nascent soul stage, let alone breaking through, if he continued to develop like this, it was only a matter of time. After not hearing Lin Yi's response for a long time, the will of heaven suddenly saw his frightened expression dripping with cold sweat. He couldn't help but feel strange. What's wrong? Are you not feeling well? That's not it. It's just that after listening to Elder Heaven's words, I felt something in my heart. Lin Yi smiled bitterly and shook his head. Feeling something? The will of heaven was stunned. Suddenly, his body shuddered and he turned pale with fright. Don't tell me you also cultivate a creation battle art? To tell you the truth, that is indeed the case. Lin Yi nodded frankly and didn't hide anything, even though it was the first time he came into contact with the will of heaven. But with the relationship of Tian Chan in front of him, he could be considered half one of them. What's more, he didn't have much confidence right now. He needed to learn more about the creation battle art from the will of heaven so that he wouldn't follow in his footsteps. After all, even if the will of heaven's meridians were shattered, he could still save him. However, if something were to happen to him, he could only sit there and wait for death. The will of heaven gasped and quickly said, "Then please stop. We are all cultivating in the wrong way." Wrong? Why? Lin Yi was stunned. After listening to the words just now, he only felt that this cultivation method was risky, but it shouldn't be completely wrong. Otherwise, whether it was the will of heaven or himself, they were all invincible at the same level. They were all invincible existences of the same level and could even kill those of a higher level. How is this possible? The will of heaven carefully looked at Lin Yi from head to toe again before he slowly said, "Let me ask you first, what is the heavenly Tao? Isn't it the pursuit of a higher realm? Above the heaven stage is the foundation establishment. After the foundation establishment is the gold core, and even the higher realm after that is the heavenly Tao." Lin Yi answered without hesitation. The will of heaven shook his head and said, "No, the real heavenly Tao is cultivation. Go against the heaven and finally achieve the great Tao. This is the real heavenly Tao." Yes, isn't this what we have been cultivating in pursuit of? Lin Yi asked curiously. When he first came to Heaven Stage Island, he had heard people mention the word cultivation. At that time, he didn't pay much attention to it. He thought it was just a new way of saying it after reaching the new realm of foundation establishment. No, no, no. What we are cultivating now is not the heavenly Tao. At best, it can only be called a pseudo-heavenly Tao. Its essence is to replace the heavenly Tao with martial arts. Although there are also foundation establishment, gold core, nascent soul, and other realms, they are not real cultivation. They can only be regarded as martial arts cultivation, a way to replace the heavenly Tao. The will of heaven shook his head repeatedly. Martial arts cultivation? Heavenly Tao cultivation? What does that mean? Lin Yi couldn't help but be confused. In the past, he had to rely on himself to figure it out. This was the first time he heard someone talk about these things seriously. Don't you understand? In order to let more people set foot on the heavenly Tao, as early as the ancient times, there were great predecessors of Heaven Stage Island who changed the heavenly Tao cultivation method into a lower threshold of martial arts cultivation. Although martial arts cultivation can obtain a stronger body and better skills, in the end, it is still a pseudo-heavenly Tao. The strength of martial arts cultivators will be very strong in the early stage, but later on, they will be much weaker than the real cultivators, and there is a huge essential difference between them. Chapter 4109. Lin Yi could understand this. Anyone would be able to understand the meaning of these words. However, it was useless. Only by truly comprehending this point would one be able to defy the heavens and become a saint. Although I can still cultivate in my current state, and I'm far more powerful than ordinary people, every breakthrough is very dangerous. If I'm not careful, my meridians will break. Especially when I broke through to the nascent soul stage last time. My meridians were all broken. The will of heaven said with lingering fear. Lin Yi was stunned. He had also cultivated the creation battle art, but he had never encountered this problem. Could it be because of the art of dragon mastery? This creation battle art originally had a flaw, but the art of dragon mastery was an all-purpose mantra. Therefore, when the two were combined and he modified it, the original flaw disappeared. Thinking about it, it was indeed possible, but judging from Tianqing's words, Lin Yi understood that this was probably a method that had no other way. The true way to train in the art of creation wasn't like what he was doing now. The art of dragon mastery only allowed him to train it, and to a certain extent, it acted as a substitute. That was all. However, after understanding this, Lin Yi wasn't too worried. Nor was he in a hurry to figure out the true cultivation method of the art of dragon mastery. After all, no matter how good the art of dragon mastery was, it was still an additional cultivation method. The art of dragon mastery was Lin Yi's true foundation. Since he could cultivate it now, he could just take it one step at a time. Why bother worrying so much? As for Tianqing, Lin Yi didn't plan on giving him the arts he'd modified with the art of dragon mastery. After all, they'd only met for a day, and even with Tianchan, even so, it wasn't to the point where they could exchange their lives for each other's. Let's wait and see for now. Lin Yi, when you broke through to the Foundation Establishment realm from Heaven Rank Great Circle, did you encounter any danger like I did? The Will of Heaven asked with concern. Lin Yi shook his head. That's not true. At that time, it felt quite smooth. It wasn't as dangerous as the meridians you mentioned just now. That's strange. Back then, I was in grave danger. The Will of Heaven looked at Lin Yi in surprise, and then said thoughtfully, but even if it's the same mental cultivation method, it varies from person to person. Or maybe it's because the level of Heaven stage great perfection is too low. When you break through from the Foundation Establishment realm to the Golden Core realm, you may feel a certain amount of pain. Maybe. Lin Yi responded non-committally. The creation battle art that he cultivated and the original version of the Will of Heaven were two different things. The experience of the Will of Heaven might not happen to him. What would happen would only be known when the time came. The pain is not the most important thing. You can grit your teeth and endure it. The biggest problem is that it's very likely to be like me. Every time I break through, my meridians can't bear the huge impact of true qi and explode. That's really fatal. You must take it as a warning. Be mentally prepared in advance. The Will of Heaven warned. Lin Yi nodded and didn't say anything else. Seeing him like this, the Will of Heaven knew that he couldn't persuade him. He didn't continue to persuade him. For cultivators, strength was more important than life. Even if they knew that it was dangerous to continue to cultivate, very few people would stop halfway. Back then, Tianqing himself was like this. Even when others advised him not to practice. When others advised him not to practice, he insisted on practicing. Although his strength had not fully recovered, at least there was hope. Now that there was hope, his first thought was to cultivate. Even he, who had encountered such a big setback, was like this, let alone Lin Yi. Since he couldn't persuade Lin Yi, the Will of Heaven simply told Lin Yi about his cultivation experience over the years, bit by bit. He tried to let Lin Yi have a reference in the future cultivation process so that even if he encountered danger, he could be prepared. Cultivation experience, especially the cultivation experience of a legendary master like the Will of Heaven, was a real priceless treasure no matter where it was. It was a good thing that couldn't be bought with spirit jades. The Will of Heaven was so generous to share it with Lin Yi. It was also a disguised form of repayment. After all, Lin Yi was a great benefactor who was like a second parent to him. Of course, the relationship between Lin Yi and Tianchan was also an important reason. Otherwise, the Will of Heaven would at most do something for Lin Yi in return, and it was impossible for him to teach so wholeheartedly. The two talked through the night until the sky was bright. They didn't feel tired at all. Instead, they talked even more excitedly. The will of heaven looked at the sky outside and suggested to Linny, "Accompany me out for a walk. How about we continue to talk while walking? Speaking of which, I haven't walked out of this room for many years. I don't know if there are any changes outside now." Linny smiled. "I wouldn't dare disobey." The two immediately went out side by side and walked in the courtyard of the pill hall. They talked and laughed and were full of interest. It immediately attracted the attention of many pill hall disciples. The will of heaven was a genuine legendary figure. It was impossible to see him normally. Moreover, they always knew that this person had become a useless person. They didn't expect him to actually go out and walk today. It seemed that he had completely recovered. The news that the former deputy island master of Middle Island, the legendary figure the Will of Heaven, had recovered spread like wildfire. Almost in a short period of time, it spread throughout the pill hall. Very soon, Lin Yi and Lin Yi saw Tianchan, who rushed over after hearing the news. However, when they saw Zhang Tianchu, who appeared behind Tianchan, their expressions suddenly turned cold. This haunting asterisk shoal. Zhang Tianchu looked at the Will of Heaven, who seemed to have been reborn, and couldn't help but say in disbelief, "You, Elder Heaven, you have recovered?" At the same time he asked this, there was a sudden commotion around. The person who came this time was actually the person with the highest authority in the pill hall, the deputy hall master of the pill hall, Zhang Dongjue. The Will of Heaven glanced at Zhang Tianchu and deliberately raised his voice. He said to everyone around him, "Tianchan is my Tian family's sister in the secular world. In the future, she will be the Will of Heaven's relative. Those who have ill intentions towards her, pay attention. Otherwise, if you really provoke my sister, I will definitely not be polite. I believe you have heard of my decisive deeds. Behave yourselves." Chapter 41:10. Tianchan was surprised and happy at the moment. Although the Will of Heaven had acknowledged her yesterday, there was no clear relationship. But now, the Will of Heaven was her brother, a super backer that no one dared to belittle. Among the crowd, only Zhang Tianchu's face was ashen. He was so angry that he gritted his teeth. Of course, he knew that the Will of Heaven's words were directed at him. This old man had just recovered from his injury, and his strength was far from his peak. But with his genius cultivation, it was only a matter of time before he recovered his strength. In the face of the Will of Heaven at his peak, not to mention Zhang Tianchu, even his grandfather Zhang Dongjue would have to give way to him. Originally, with the gradual consolidation of his position as a young master, Zhang Tianchu felt that it was a piece of cake to get his hands on Tianchan, his beautiful sister-in-law. In the end, he didn't expect that the Will of Heaven's words would directly seal all hope. This old fart. But even so, Zhang Tianchu didn't dare to bear a grudge against the Will of Heaven. It was useless even if he bore a grudge. If he really provoked the Will of Heaven, the Will of Heaven could kill him as easily as crushing an ant. The only person he could bear a grudge against was Lin Yi, who cured the Will of Heaven. Noticing Zhang Tianchu's resentful and cold eyes, Lin Yi smiled faintly. For him now, as long as Zhang Tianchu didn't use any insidious means against Tianchan, there was no substantial threat. His strength was far inferior to his dead cousin Zhang Tianjie. How could this kind of trash fight with him? On the other side, Zhang Dongjue, who had just arrived, looked at his grandson with a deep meaning. Recently, Zhang Tianchu had been pestering Tianchan. He had heard about it, but he didn't intend to stop it. Anyway, he let Tianchan and Zhang Tianjie have a ghost marriage. The purpose was just to take revenge on Tianchan. Now, even if he let another grandson take advantage of it, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, in the past, it was just a matter of a few words. Now that the Will of Heaven had publicly announced that he would support Tianchan, Zhang Dongjue couldn't act rashly for the time being. After all, the legend of the Will of Heaven was still there. No matter what, Zhang Dongjue had to weigh his options carefully. At the very least, he couldn't afford to fall out with a legendary figure like the Will of Heaven before he had a clear understanding of the Will of Heaven's strength. Thinking of this, Zhang Dongjue immediately congratulated him with a face full of joy. "Old Heaven, you've recovered from your injuries. just like a dragon returning to the sea or a tiger returning to the forest. It's just a matter of time before you regain your former glory. Congratulations. The Will of Heaven smiled and said, You flatter me, Vice Hall Master Zhang. Glory or not, it's all in the past. For me, everything is starting from the beginning. At this time, Hou Guanqi and Cai Zhongyang came from afar. Zhang Dongjue saw them and said, Little Ho, Celestial Elder's recovery is such a joyous occasion. Why don't you think of a way to tell Hall Master Zhang? These words were meant to test the waters. Zhang Dongjue had never been willing to be under anyone, but to ask him to go against Zhang Liju. He didn't even have the guts to do so, let alone the ability. The only chance he had was that Zhang Liju wasn't around all year round. But even so, he only dared to do some small things, afraid that Hou Guanqi's disciples had some secret way of contacting Zhang Liju. Otherwise, if Zhang Liju caught him in the act, he'd be done for. Hou Guanqi didn't say anything. He replied without missing a beat, Vice Hall Master Zhang, my Sifu is very secretive. It's not easy to find him, but I'll try my best to send a message. When he receives it, he'll come back naturally. Zhang Dongjue nodded and looked at Lin Yi. This must be Alchemist Lin, right? Since you've healed our Celestial Elder's injury, you're the savior of the Hall of Elixir. If you have any requests, we'll definitely do it. These words were very passionate, but Lin Yi could hear the perfunctory tone in it. He smiled faintly. If there's a need in the future, I won't hesitate to help. But I'm still a freelancer right now, and following Master Kai is already a rare opportunity for me to learn and train. Is that so? To be able to cure a terminal illness like Celestial Elders, that would be an earth-shattering news. Alchemist Lin, aren't you being too humble? Zhang Dongjue blinked his eyes and pretended to praise him. I wouldn't dare. I'm just speaking the truth. I sincerely want to learn from Master Kai, Lin Yi said faintly. Upon hearing this, Zhang Dongjue sized up Lin Yi once more. This guy looked very normal, and he was ridiculously young. From his tone, he didn't sound like a powerful alchemist at all. From what Zhang Dongjue could see, this Lin Yi just happened to have a special prescription for the Will of Heaven, and that's why he was able to cure it. If his medical skills were as good as Zhang Liju's, he would have been famous on the Five Islands long ago. Why would he need to learn from Cai Zhongyang? He clearly wasn't some powerful character. After coming to this conclusion, Zhang Dongjue didn't care about Lin Yi anymore. He didn't care about this country bumpkin that popped out of nowhere. He said faintly, If that's the case, Lil Kai, please help me take care of this alchemist Lin. Take him to eat something to express your gratitude. I still have things to do, so I won't be accompanying you guys. The rest of you, don't you have to work? With that, Zhang Dongjue put his hands behind his back like a master and left with Zheng Tianchu. The rest of the disciples from the Hall of Elixir also left. Ha! This old bastard really knew how to act. Lin Yi and the Will of Heaven looked at each other, their eyes filled with mockery and mockery. After coming to Heaven Class Island for so long, Lin Yi had seen quite a few big shots. Whether it was Shanghai Tianhua in the north or the Will of Heaven in front of him, their auras were all naturally admirable. Only this Vice Hall Master Zheng's aura was fake, and no matter where he went, he always looked like Kong Ming Ming. It really made people speechless. Since this master has spoken, Elder Heaven, Lin Yi, young friend, why don't we go out for a meal? Hou Guanqi teased with a smile. That's all right, I wanted to go out for a breather too. Let's go find a place outside. The Will of Heaven nodded with a smile. Then let's go to Five Elements Commerce. There won't be too many people there, and we can talk without worry. Cai Zhongyang suggested. Chapter 41:11. Of course, Lin Yi and the others had no objection to this. They immediately prepared the car and went out together. On the other side, after Zhang Dongjue took Zheng Tianchu to a secluded place, he suddenly stopped and said in a dignified tone, Chu are you interested in Tianchan? Zheng Tianchu was shocked, and his face instantly turned pale. Coveting his brother's sister-in-law was a serious crime. He quickly begged for mercy. Grandpa, I know I was wrong. I was just momentarily blinded by greed. I won't dare to do it again. Don't dare? Why not? Since I chose you as my heir, Everything will be yours in the future. She's just a woman. What's there to be afraid of? Zhang Dongjue changed his tone. Grandpa, what do you mean? Zhang Tianchu was stunned. Don't you understand? You are my grandson. Whether you have feelings for Tianchan or not, I won't stop you. Zhang Dongjue patted him on the shoulder. Zhang Tianchu was overjoyed. He didn't expect Zhang Dongjue to have such an attitude. But after thinking about it carefully, in the cultivation world, strength was king. He was a big shot who would inherit the Zhang family in the future. It seemed that it was not a big deal to covet Tianchan, however. Don't provoke her in the near future. The will of heaven was a troublesome existence in Zhongdao. You can't act rashly until you know whether his strength has fully recovered. As for the matter of Tianchan, I will find a way to fulfill your wish. Do you understand? Zhang Dongjue reminded him. Yes, I understand. I will listen to Grandpa's orders in the future. Zhang Tianchu nodded repeatedly and was overjoyed. In a quiet private room in Five Elements Commerce, Lin Yi and others sat at a table. Because there were no outsiders, Lin Yi could sit with Tianchan without worry. On the other side of him sat the will of heaven. Opposite them were Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang. Lin Yi originally wanted to call Sydney over, but when he walked to the door, he found that Sydney was cultivating in seclusion, so he didn't want to disturb her. Anyway, these people were all here, so it was the same to introduce them later. When the dishes were ready, the will of heaven toasted Lin Yi first and said happily, Brother Lin Yi, since you and my sister Tianchan are Dao companions, then I will call you brother. Lin Yi was shocked. He hurriedly said, Elder Heaven, you're my senior. I'm not worthy. If I say you deserve it, then you deserve it. The will of heaven waved his hand and said, You cured my terminal illness, and your kindness is like giving me a new life. Without you, I would still be a useless person. So, I'm your big brother now because of Tianchan. When Lin Yi heard this, he could only smile and nodded. He didn't say anything more. After all, in the world of cultivation, the strong were respected. Age was never important, strength and ability were the key. At this time, Kai Zhongyang also raised his glass and toasted Lin Yi. He pretended to complain and said with a smile, Speaking of which, young hero Lin, you're really not kind at all. You have such brilliant medical skills, but you didn't tell us at all. You made us worry for nothing. That's right, little friend Lin Yi. You really lied to us. Hou Guanqi also smiled and echoed. Lin Yi couldn't help but smile and said, I already have medical skills. I already knew it when I was in the secular world. It's just that I didn't see Big Brother Heaven's injury before, so I didn't have the confidence. I only dared to try after seeing it. I didn't mean to hide it from the two of you. Oh, didn't you know that Brother Lin Yi's medical skills were profound? Then why did you find him to treat my injury? The will of heaven was shocked. Kai Zhongyang and Hou Guanqi looked at each other and explained, Elder Heaven, actually, young hero Lin's purpose of going to the pill hall this time was to see Tianchan. As for asking the medicine master to treat your injury, it was actually just an excuse. In the end, we didn't expect him to actually treat your injury. The will of heaven instantly laughed and patted Lin Yi's shoulder. This is fate. Come. For fate, let's cheers. They were all on the same side, so they gathered together to drink and chat. Naturally, they were in high spirits and happy. However, when they were about to finish eating, Lin Yi was a little worried and said, That Zhang Tianchu is plotting against Xiao Chan. I'm a little worried about letting Xiao Chan stay in the pill hall like this. It's okay. I'm here. Tianchan is my sister. No matter how bold that kid is, he won't dare to do anything. The will of heaven immediately patted his chest and said, It's easy to dodge a spear in the open, but it's hard to guard against a stab in the dark. This guy is a sinister villain. With Big Brother Heaven here, he naturally won't dare to do anything, but I'm afraid that he will play some tricks. Lin Yi listened and shook his head. That's right. Zhang Tianchu is a very wretched person. Before Zhang Tianjie died, he didn't dare to be too arrogant, but he often did some wretched things. Now that he has Zhang Dongjue's support, we still have to be careful. Hou Guanqi nodded in agreement. With that said, the will of heaven was in a difficult position. Although he could take care of Tianchan, he couldn't watch her every moment. After all, His injuries had just healed, and he needed time to recover his strength. He couldn't keep showing his face outside. With your face, Big Brother Heaven, can you bring Xiao Chan out to establish her own sect? At least, can you let her not stay in the pill hall? Linny suddenly asked. Now that Zhang Liju wasn't here, Zhang Dongjue could do whatever he wanted in the pill hall. Even with the Will of Heaven's words to protect Tian Chan, the Will of Heaven wasn't a member of the pill hall. If Zhang Dongjue really wanted to do something, an outsider like him might not be able to do anything. The best way was naturally to let Tian Chan leave the pill hall as soon as possible. As long as she could establish her own sect, Zhang Dongjue wouldn't be able to do anything. If something really happened, the Will of Heaven could intervene without any hesitation. It shouldn't be a problem. Since Tian Chan is my sister, I'll bring her out. Even that old man Zhang Dongjue wouldn't dare say anything. Linny bro, just wait for my good news. The Will of Heaven thought about it and said. The Will of Heaven was a decisive man. After making up his mind, he brought Tian Chan back to the pill hall. After all, he was making the decision for Tian Chan. Even if the Will of Heaven came forward, Tian Chan herself would still have to go back and express her stance. This big brother of his was quite confident. Linny sighed. If it was someone else, they would have to be mentally prepared and hesitate before dealing with Zhang Dongjue, the vice head of the pill hall. Chapter 41:12. The Will of Heaven left with Tian Chan, while Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang continued to go out to prepare for the auction in Zhongdao. Only Lin Yi turned around and went back to his room. Sensing Lin Yi's return, Sydney immediately stopped her cultivation and hurriedly greeted him. She asked with concern, "How is Tian Chan?" "Sydney, don't worry. Everything is going well." Lin Yi immediately smiled and told her what happened in the past 2 days. After listening to Tian Chan, Shueli was not jealous at all. Instead, she sincerely thought for Tian Chan and said, it would be great if Tian Chan could really move out of the alchemy department. With Zhang Dongjue suppressing her from above and Zhang Tianchu pestering her from below, the alchemy department has become a troublesome place for her. If she continues to stay there, she will get into trouble sooner or later. Yes, that's why I asked Brother Tian to talk about this. Linny nodded in agreement. He looked up and down at Sydney and suddenly had an idea. If Tian Chan could really come out and start her own business, it would be a good choice to let her be with Sydney. After all, according to the previous consideration, it was actually a very troublesome thing to bring Sydney back to the North Island. Judging from Sydney's performance, she did not reject Tian Chan. The two women should be able to get along well. However, this was just a sudden idea. It was not mature yet, and he did not know how to operate it. Moreover, it was still unknown whether Tian Chan could successfully escape. At this stage, this idea could only be thought in his mind. Lin Yi did not say it out loud. However, what Lin Yi did not expect was that the Will of Heaven was extremely efficient. He had just talked to Sydney, and the sky was not even dark, and the Will of Heaven had already returned with Tian Chan. When the door opened, Tian Chan and Sydney happened to meet each other, and they suddenly sighed with emotion. Before this, the two of them were transmitted from the secular world to Zhongdao. Although they knew each other, they were not too familiar with each other, and there was no obvious intersection. But now, the two of them were together because of Lin Yi. When they met again, they had a kind of intimate feeling like sisters reuniting. Not to mention the experience of the two women in the secular world. After coming to Heaven Stage Island, it could be said to be full of ups and downs. One was forced in Alchemy Hall. The other was bullied and humiliated in Snow Sword Sect, and they were both in the same predicament. Because of their relationship with Lin Yi, the two women held hands and talked about their experiences on Heaven Stage Island together. They had a common language, and they quickly became closer to each other. In a short while, the two women already called each other sisters and chatted happily. Brother Linny, you are really lucky. You enjoy the happiness of having two wives. Others are envious. The Will of Heaven looked at this scene and joked. Although he was Tian Chan's elder brother, Heaven Stage Island was not like the secular world. As long as one was strong, it was normal for him to have lovers all over the world. He would not be dissatisfied because Lin Yi had other women. On the contrary, in the opinion of him and Hou Guanqi, for a genius like Lin Yi, if he only had Tian Shan as his cultivation partner, it would be strange. That would be really strange. Whether it was Tian Shan or Sydney, they were both great beauties with unparalleled beauty. Lin Yi was able to make them give their hearts to him. This luck was indeed enviable. Even the will of heaven, a cultivation maniac who wholeheartedly pursued the heavenly law, could not help but sigh. What he did not know was that none of Lin Yi's other lovers were any less beautiful than the two women. When all the women were together in the future, they would be the true winners in life. It is indeed my luck to be able to meet them in this life. Lin Yi looked at this gratifying scene and nodded emotionally. He did not expect that the relationship between the two women would be so harmonious. However, he could guess that the two women were so close to each other. Although it was because of their congenial personalities, there was another reason, and that was because they cared about his feelings. After all, from Lin Yi's point of view, if the two women still quarreled with each other in the current situation, it would be a headache for him. But brother Lin Yi, I still have to spoil the mood by saying this. Although it is enviable to have multiple lovers, you should not only envy the lovebirds but not the fairies. Don't slack off in your cultivation. The will of heaven warned. The land of beauties was the grave of heroes. Throughout the ages, there were countless geniuses who had outstanding talents, but they wasted their time in the land of beauties and finally became ordinary. The will of heaven sincerely regarded Lin Yi as one of his own. He did not want to see such a tragedy happen to Lin Yi. Brother Heaven, don't worry. I am very clear that strength is king. If I am not strong enough, no matter how many beauties I have, I can't protect them. Therefore, for me, they are not obstacles on the path of cultivation. Instead, they are the motivation for me to continue to improve. Lin Yi said with a smile. Indeed, femme fatale is not a lie. Although their unparalleled beauty is your fortune, they are just like that Zhang Tianqiu, always attracting all sorts of trouble. Only with great power can you truly protect them. Tianxing nodded. That's right. You're right. You're right. By the way, Brother Heaven, why are you so fast? Have you settled Zhang Dongjue's side? Lin Yi turned to ask. Of course. Zhang Dongjue won't dare to say no. The will of heaven laughed out loud. Tianxing laughed heartily. I've already seen through him. That guy is a classic example of someone who bullies the weak and fears the strong. If I had lowered my voice and discussed things with him, he might have taken advantage of me. But this time, when I went over and told him that Tian Shan is my sister and I'm going to take her out to start her own family, what do you think he did? What did he do? Lin Yi asked curiously. That old man was frightened by me on the spot. After holding it in for a long time, he finally said, since this is your family's matter, I will naturally leave it up to you to decide. Haha, just thinking about that ugly, bitter face of his is hilarious. Tianxing laughed loudly. That Deputy Hall Chief Zheng. Maybe he is temporarily not clear about your strength. He doesn't dare to openly offend you, the legendary Deputy Island Master of Middle Island. He is full of tricks, but he doesn't have the courage to openly offend you, so he can only give in. Lin Yi also smiled. Chapter 41:13. Zhang Dongjue, this old man, has already lost his drive to improve. He can only stop here. There's no possibility for him to improve further. Even if I haven't recovered my strength, I don't need to care about trash like him. The will of heaven curled his lips and looked at him disdainfully. As he spoke, he still couldn't hide his arrogance and overbearingness from when he was dominating Heaven's Stage Island. But this kind of person can't do anything right. Even if he can't become a big problem, he's still a threat. Brother Tian, it's better for you to pay attention. Lin Yi reminded. Brother Lin Yi, don't worry. I know this. The will of heaven smiled indifferently. He turned to look at the two girls who were chatting intimately and asked, speaking of which, what do you plan to do with the two of them? Are you going to stay in Five Elements Commerce forever? Five Elements Commerce had Kai Zhongyang's protection. It wasn't impossible to continue staying here. However, the will of heaven could tell that living under someone else's roof wasn't Lin Yi's style. Moreover, Five Elements commerce was still a part of Pill Hall. If that was the case, it would go against the original intention of letting Tian-chan establish her own sect. I'm also considering this. Brother Tian, do you have any good suggestions? Linny asked. If you want to stay in Middle Island with them, there are only two choices. One is to join a sect, and the other is to establish your own sect. However, you don't even consider Pill Hall. I don't think you have any intention of joining a sect, right? The Will of Heaven asked. Of course. Tian-chan and Sydney were bullied and oppressed in their own sect. If they join another sect, it's hard to guarantee that it won't happen again. So, I can only choose the latter. Linny nodded. If that's the case, Brother Linny, you can consider starting a small business. Although it's hard for an ordinary person to establish a foothold in Middle Island, you have us as your backing. It's not like you don't have any background. If it's just a small business, it shouldn't be a problem to establish a foothold. The Will of Heaven suggested. That's fine. Hearing this, Lin Yi's eyes lit up. This way, not only would he be able to settle down the two girls, he would also be able to earn some spirit jades, killing two birds with one stone. Then, he rubbed his chin and pondered. But, what kind of business should I start? The two most popular products on the Heaven Stage Island are elixirs and heavenly treasures. The latter is highly dependent on the source of goods, so it won't be easy to get on the right track in a short period of time. However, elixirs are definitely in short supply, and it just so happens that Tian-chan is an alchemist. If you need it, you can also purchase from Little Kai. I think it will be a good way to go. The Will of Heaven analyzed for him. The reason why the Middle Island Alchemy Hall could have such a high position today, and why the Five Elements Commerce could sit firmly on the throne of the Commerce Alliance's #1, in the end, it was all because of the great influence of pills. In the 5 great islands of the Heaven rank, this was a hard currency that was even more reliable than spiritual jades. No matter who it was, no one would complain about having too many medicinal pills, especially high-quality medicinal pills. If that's the case, we can really open a shop that specializes in selling medicinal pills. The more Lin Yi thought about it, the more he felt that this was a good idea. If they really opened a shop, in fact, there was no need to look for Kai Zhongyang to purchase goods. Not only was Tian-chan an alchemist, he himself was also an alchemist, and in terms of quality, he was absolutely superb. At that time, he would let Tian-chan refine some common medicinal pills, and Lin Yi himself would specialize in refining some superb medicinal pills, which should be enough to meet the needs of the shop. Tian-chan and Sydney, who were on the side, heard Lin Yi and the Will of Heaven's words, came over and nodded in agreement. Okay, let's open an elixir shop together. This is a good idea. Since both of you agree, then it's decided. Lin Yi was not a sloppy person. Seeing the situation, he made a decision immediately, and then said, but if we want to open an elixir shop, the first thing we need to solve is the problem of the shop. The quality of the location of the shop often directly determined the popularity of the business. However, in this Middle Island, it was as difficult as ascending to heaven for ordinary people to get a shop in a good location. If one did not have a strong background and backing, it was purely wishful thinking. The shop is not a problem. I'll look for an old friend of mine for help. This is just a matter of a word. Brother Lin Yi, you just need to look for a good location first. The Will of Heaven patted his chest. He was the dignified deputy island master of the Middle Island. Even if he had been injured for so many years, his influence was still there, not to mention that his injuries had now healed. At this time, both Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang came back from work. After hearing Lin Yi's plan to open an elixir shop, both of them expressed their approval. Young hero Lin, actually, you don't need to look for a location. I just happen to have a ready-made shop on hand. Kai Zhongyang suddenly said after listening. A ready-made shop? Lin Yi and the others were stunned and said doubtfully, Senior Kai, you don't want me to open it here at Five Elements Commerce, do you? How is that possible? With the influence of Five Elements Commerce, it will be difficult for young hero Lin to attract any customers even if it is just on this street. Not to mention here. Kai Zhongyang shook his head and laughed. Five Elements Commerce had the backing of Middle Island Elixir Hall, and it was indisputably the #1 chamber of commerce just by relying on the elixir business. If Lin Yi really opened the elixir shop next to it, he was afraid that there would be no customers at all. Where is it then? Lin Yi asked. That shop is not too far from here. It is only 4 streets away. Although the location isn't very prosperous, it is still quite good. Kai Zhongyang explained, it was originally a weapon shop, but because of poor management, the owner can no longer make money. I have met him a few times, so I originally wanted to buy it and open a small medical shop, but I have been busy preparing for the auction recently, so I haven't had the time to care about it. Now, I can ask him to transfer it to you. Isn't this stealing someone's beauty? Lin Yi said hesitantly. Hey, young hero Lin, you worry too much. No matter what, this old man is still the deputy shopkeeper of the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce. Opening a medical center is just a personal hobby. This idea is just a spur-of-the-moment idea. If I really do this old man will have to carefully consider whether or not people will gossip about me. Kai Zhongyang waved his hand and said with a smile. Chapter 41:14. In that case, thank you very much, seniors. Lin Yi did not refuse and immediately agreed. It's not too late now. Why don't we go and have a look at the shop now? Kai Zhongyang suggested. That's what I'm thinking. Lin Yi nodded cheerfully, turned his head and said, Sydney, Xiaochan, you two stay here and talk. We'll be back soon. Okay. Sydney and Tian-chan agreed in unison. It was not suitable for them to show their faces in public, especially when Sydney was wanted on the street before, so it was even more difficult for her to go out. Lin Yi and the others immediately set off, and Kai Zhongyang led them to the chosen shop. Indeed, as he said, although this location was a little worse than the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce, it was still quite a good place with people coming and going. The only regret was that the shop was not very big, but Lin Yi had only planned to run a small business with the 2 girls. It would be difficult to manage a big shop. The shop in front of them was enough for them to establish a foothold. He looked it up and down, and was very satisfied with it as a whole. He asked for it on the spot, and with Kai Zhongyang's help, the original owner didn't ask for too much of a transfer price, only giving a very low friendship price. Even so, it was still 10,000 spirit jade. Kai Zhongyang had wanted to pay for Lin Yi in one go. 10,000 spirit jades was an astronomical figure for ordinary people, but as the deputy shopkeeper of the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce, this amount of spirit jades was nothing to him. However, he did not expect that Lin Yi would take out a spirit jade card without hesitation and pay the bill on the spot. This scene really shocked everyone for a long time. They all knew that Lin Yi was a disciple of the 3 pavilions of the North Island. Who would have thought that a disciple of the 3 pavilions of the North Island would have so many spiritual jade? Only the will of heaven patted Lin Yi's shoulder and laughed. Brother Lin Yi was extraordinary. How could he be judged by common sense? After deciding on the shop, the next thing to do was to find someone to renovate the shop and transform it into a style suitable for the elixir shop. This task was taken care of by Kai Zhongyang. As the deputy manager of 5 Elements Commerce, he was the only one with experience among the people present. It was most suitable for him to take care of it. It would take at least 3 days to renovate, and during this period, it was just enough for Lin Yi to prepare elixir. Although Kai Zhongyang said that he could supply him at a low price, this was after all suspected of abusing his power for personal gain. Lin Yi did not want to ruin Kai Zhongyang's principles and reputation. Moreover, the 2 alchemists, Lin Yi and Tian-chan, were here. They did not need ready-made elixir. They only needed ready-made elixir materials. For this, Ho Guanqi could easily buy it as long as he called the alchemy hall. After everyone dispersed, Lin Yi returned to the room. Tian-chan and Sydney immediately greeted him and asked, "How is it? Is the shop satisfactory?" "Very good. I have already bought it." Lin Yi nodded and smiled. "By the way, Xiaochan, how is your level of alchemy?" "With my current level, I can at most refine 4th grade elixir. I can basically guarantee the success rate, but I can't guarantee the quality. However, elixir below 3rd grade is not a problem." Tian-chan replied. Lin Yi pondered for a moment. Previously, Kai Zhongyang introduced to him that in the market of Middle Island, almost no one would buy elixir below 3rd grade. Here, generally, 4th grade and 5th grade elixir were more popular. Even 6th grade and 7th grade elixir appeared. If he wanted to open an alchemy shop to be competitive, the elixir sold must at least be 3rd grade and above. This was already the bottom line. All right then, Chan, you'll be in charge of making 3rd and 4th level elixirs from now on, and I'll be in charge of 4th and higher level elixirs. We'll try to make as many elixirs as possible in these 3 days, Linny decided. So far, the highest elixir that Linny had successfully refined was 4th grade. Although he would definitely try 5th grade or even higher grade elixir in the future, it seemed that the alchemy shop could only focus on 4th grade elixir for the time being. Okay, I will listen to you. Tian-chan nodded happily. What about me? What should I do? Sydney asked. She was not an alchemist like Tian-chan, so she could not help Lin-yi. So, she felt a little useless. Sydney, you should take good care of yourself first. When the shop opens, you will be the proprietress of the front desk. You will be busy. Lin-yi joked with a smile. Okay then. Hearing the word proprietress, Sydney could not help but blush. She bowed her head and did not speak. Lin-yi and Tian-chan smiled. At this time, Ho Guanqi had already asked someone to send the elixir materials. The two immediately took out the alchemy furnace and prepared to start alchemy. For the first time, they saw Lin-yi's unique divine pesticide cauldron. Sydney and Tian-chan were both surprised. The integration of modern technology and alchemy technology really opened their eyes. It could automatically refine elixir. It was simply an unheard of alchemy artifact. However, when they thought of Han Jingjing, who was still missing, Lin-yi and the two women could not help but sigh. They secretly prayed that Han Jingjing would not be like the two women, being bullied and humiliated. 3 days was not long, but it was not short either. When Lin-yi put all his thoughts on alchemy, with the help of the divine pesticide cauldron, his efficiency was absolutely shocking. Just like the last time in the extreme North Island, in just 3 days, Lin-yi once again refined a total of 124th grade elixirs. They were all the elixirs that Hongzhong had given him before. There were many kinds of elixirs, and more importantly, they were all of the best quality. In contrast, the results of Tian-chan's alchemy in the past 3 days could only be regarded as average. 34th grade elixirs of medium quality and 33rd grade elixirs of high quality. Of course, many of them were the stock that she had refined before. She did not have the divine pesticide cauldron, so it was impossible to refine too quickly. The results of the two of them added up to a total of 180 elixirs. Although it was far from enough for a big chamber of commerce like 5 Elements Commerce, it was enough for a newly opened small elixir shop to support for a period of time. Here, the elixirs were ready. Kai Zhongyang had also found someone to renovate the shop. Lin-yi did not specifically choose a good day to open the shop. After a simple preparation, he immediately decided to open the shop. The elixir shop was named Tiandan Pavilion. This was named by Lin-yi himself. He also let the deputy island master of Middle Island, the Will of Heaven, personally write the inscription. Although he was not a calligraphy master, the calligraphy on the horizontal board was like a dragon and snake. It had a grand pattern, which added a bit of extraordinary temperament to the shop. Chapter 41:15. Although the elixirs were only of the 4th and 3rd grade, there were so many excellent elixirs, and the price was much cheaper than other shops. As soon as the Tiandan Pavilion opened for business, it attracted many passers-by. Hey, am I seeing things? Why are there so many excellent elixirs? Someone came in and glanced around, and he couldn't help but be stunned. That's right. This heavenly pill pavilion doesn't look very impressive, and the medicinal pills they display aren't that high-leveled either. However, more than half of them are rare top-grade pills. I feel that even the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce wouldn't be this exaggerated, right? Are they fake? The bystanders were surprised and suspicious. Fake? You don't know how to say others are fake. You have the nerve to come to our middle island to embarrass yourself? Look at the quality. Which part of it is fake? Someone immediately retorted. Indeed, they are not fake. This old man is a specialist in alchemy appraisers. I have seen at least hundreds of alchemy pills, if not thousands. However, this Heavenly Dan Pavilion is obviously just a small shop with only a few shop assistants. Yet, the quality of the alchemy pills is not inferior to that of the Five Elements Chamber of Commerce. Other chambers of commerce simply cannot compare with it. This is really strange. An old man in the crowd affirmed. I dare to bet that the boss of this Tiandan Pavilion definitely has a strong background. Maybe he is controlled by a big shot in the alchemy hall. That's why he can get so many excellent elixirs. Otherwise, there is no other explanation. Someone was surprised and attracted the crowd's attention. Who cares so much? As long as they are really excellent elixirs, and the price is so low, if we don't hurry up and grab them now, maybe we won't have such good stuff later. Looking at the crowded scene in front of them, and some people even started to rush to buy the elixirs, Lin Yi and the others looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. It was the first day of business, and this was a rare good start. In fact, it was not strange for such a scene to happen. However, the Heaven Stage Island, especially the Middle Island, was full of people with good eyesight. With so many top-grade medicinal pills that they normally couldn't even snatch, and the prices were much cheaper than others, it would be strange if they weren't tempted at all. Business was booming, so Lin Yi and the others were naturally very busy. Lin Yi personally became the shopkeeper, and Tian Chan followed by his side to help. As for Sydney, she specially changed into a female uniform. She purposely covered her face with a veil and busied herself as a waiter. Hiring beautiful women as waitresses was a common tactic used by many large chambers of commerce. Not only could it attract customers, but it was also easier to make business with male customers. After all, not many men were willing to lose face in front of beautiful women. Therefore, the appearance of Sydney did not arouse much suspicion. Even if someone wondered why she was wearing a veil, they would only think that Tiandan Pavilion was trying to attract customers, and deliberately created a sense of mystery. In addition, she was very careful and never showed her beauty in front of customers. Even if someone was stunned by her and Tian Chan, it was only to satisfy their envy for the time being. For a while, it did not cause the expected trouble. After all, these people came for the medicinal pills. Normally, they would not stare at the waitresses. Seeing more and more spiritual jades coming in, Lin Yi could not help but be happy. If this continued, Tiandan Pavilion would soon be on the right track. This was the foundation for them to establish a foothold in the Middle Island in the future. At this moment, suddenly, a well-dressed middle-aged man came in from the door, with two subordinates behind him. Both of them were tall and sturdy men, revealing their gold core stage cultivation. After pushing and scolding with a fierce face, everyone was unwilling to cause trouble, so they immediately made way for them. Oh, Tiandan Pavilion? What a big tone. Such a small shop dares to call itself a pavilion? There are so many ignorant and fearless people these days. Aren't they afraid of being laughed at? However, this business is not bad. The middle-aged man said in a weird tone. What a joke. Yi Qingtang said. The crowd suddenly quieted down a little. Everyone's eyes moved back and forth between Lin Yi and the middle-aged man. They unconsciously showed an expression of watching the fun. Listening to the tone of this man, it was clear that he did not come with good intentions. Hearing this, Lin Yi looked at him coldly. Although there was an evil fire in his heart, he immediately suppressed it. He had been mentally prepared for this kind of thing as early as before the opening. As the saying goes, open the door to welcome guests from all over the world. No matter what kind of guests they would meet. Some were easy to serve, and naturally some were difficult to serve. Especially since he was not familiar with the people and the place, he was afraid that the first day of the opening would not be so smooth and calm. Lin Yi secretly warned himself that now he was opening the door to do business. He must learn from Hongzhong. Only by being amiable can he make money. He must be patient in everything. He must not be impulsive. Otherwise, it would be difficult to keep this business open for a long time. Seeing that Lin Yi ignored him, the middle-aged man's tone suddenly became more strange. I have been here for so long, and there is no one who comes to greet me. How can such a shop open and do business? Humph, the big chamber of commerce is not so arrogant. Such a small broken shop, but not only has a big tone, but also such a big style. I really don't know where his confidence comes from. It makes me speechless. For a time, the people who were busy buying stopped their actions. Their eyes were all focused on the well-dressed middle-aged man, and they whispered. Seeing this, Sydney did not want to put Linny in a difficult position. She decided to bite the bullet and go up to greet him. She did not hope to make any business out of this person. As long as he did not affect other customers, she would be thankful. However, Lin Yi gently pulled her back and personally walked in front of the middle-aged man. He could see that this person did not come with good intentions and was afraid that it would not be so easy to get rid of him. It is a small business, so it is inevitable that I will not be able to serve you well. Please forgive me. May I know what you would like to buy? Linny looked at the person and asked indifferently, Buy what? Do you really think I am here to buy something? With such poor eyesight, you have the nerve to open a pill shop here? The person sneered and looked up and down at Linny. Then, with a face full of arrogance, he said, Listen carefully. I am the deputy shopkeeper of the medicine sect, Diao Huanshan. I heard from my subordinates that a new pill shop has opened here, so I came personally to see if there is anything I can do to cooperate with you. So he was in the same trade. After hearing this, Lin Yi immediately understood. As the saying goes, people in the same trade are enemies. The person in front of him obviously did not come with good intentions. His so-called cooperation was definitely not something good. Chapter 41:16. When Diao Huanshan heard this, he was stunned. His originally arrogant expression immediately became a little awkward. This heavenly elixir pavilion was only a newly opened small shop. According to his expectations and past experience, when someone suddenly heard that the famed medicine sect had such a big name, how could they not try to curry favor? He never thought that after he made a name for himself, the other party would still dare to be so indifferent. He had already said that he would give him a chance to cooperate, but not only did he not shed tears of gratitude, he was actually so unwilling. This was simply intolerable. So to say, shopkeeper, you don't plan to give me the face of the medicine sect? Diao Huanshan snorted coldly in anger out of humiliation. Linny couldn't stop laughing when he heard that. This guy didn't even try to tempt him, but directly started to threaten him. The so-called cooperation with the medicine sect was obvious. He had already begun to reveal his fox's tail so quickly. Shopkeeper Diao, since we are all businessmen, then naturally, business is our foundation. Face or not, shouldn't be something that we businessmen should consider, right? Linny smiled indifferently, but seeing that the other party's face was livid, he didn't want to force him into a deadlock. So he immediately said, All right, shopkeeper Diao, what suggestion do you have? Why don't you just say it? Diao Huanshan heard that and couldn't help but look at Linny in surprise. This young man looked so young, but he didn't expect him to be so eloquent. With one sentence, he took the initiative in the conversation. He could be said to be very experienced. However, in the face of absolute power, no matter how good your negotiation skills are, it's all useless. You can only obediently follow what I say, and don't even think about escaping from the palm of my hand. Shopkeeper, since you opened an elixir shop here, you should know that this is the territory of Zhongdao Market, right? Diao Huanshan asked with narrowed eyes. Of course, but so what? Linny looked at him and asked back. The surrounding dozen streets, including the Five Elements commerce area, were all within the territory of Zhongdao Market, which was several times larger than the North Island. Since you know that this is Zhongdao Market, shopkeeper, have you never heard of the Elixir Alliance? All the merchants who sell elixirs in the Middle Island Market Square must unconditionally accept the management of the Elixir Alliance. This is the rule, and no one can break it, Diao Huanshan said with a cold smile. Elixir Alliance? Lin Yi was taken aback. He had never heard of this before. He had never heard Kai Zhongyang mention it during the few days he had been with him. Today was the opening of the new shop, so people like the Will of Heaven, Ho Guanqi, and Kai Zhongyang would naturally come to support the opening, but they hadn't arrived yet. Lin Yi couldn't find anyone to verify the truth of the other party's words. What? From your expression, it seems like you don't believe me? Diao Huanshan curled his lips mockingly, then turned to the crowd and said, "There should be some reasonable people among you. You shouldn't be so ignorant that you haven't even heard of the Elixir Alliance, right? I can prove this. Zhongdao Market does have a specialized Elixir Alliance. The purpose of its existence is to supervise the quality of elixirs sold by many merchants, so that fake elixirs won't harm customers and affect the reputation of our Middle Island market. I am the elixir appraiser of the Elixir Alliance," an old man in the crowd replied. The rest of the people present nodded. Even if they weren't merchants, this was common knowledge. As long as they had spent some time in Zhongdao Market, they would naturally know about it. Naturally, they would know about it. Now you shouldn't be suspicious anymore, right? You dare to open an elixir shop here without even knowing about the Elixir Alliance? Shopkeeper, you are truly ignorant and fearless. Diao Huanshan sneered. So what? The quality of the elixirs of our Tiandan Pavilion is absolutely reliable. There won't be any fake elixirs, and we can accept the inspection of the Elixir Alliance at any time. However, what does this have to do with the cooperation that shopkeeper Diao mentioned? Linny asked calmly. We can accept the inspection of the Elixir Alliance at any time? Do you believe that yourself? Diao Huanshan suddenly laughed. He moved in front of Linny and lowered his voice, saying, "Shopkeeper, don't be so sure. We are out to do business, so who doesn't know about this? As long as we really put in the effort to check, there is no elixir shop without Winnie. Oh yes, by the way, we, the medicine sect, are in charge of this year's Elixir Alliance Chamber of Commerce." What do you mean? Linny frowned slightly. It's very simple. All the inspections this year will be decided by the medicine sect. As long as we say you can do it even if you can't. However, if we say you can't, you can't do it even if you can. Do you understand what I mean now? Diao Huanshan threatened smugly. Shopkeeper Diao, could it be that you want me to pay a protection fee to the medicine sect? Lin Yi's face darkened. Although there was absolutely no Winnie in his elixirs, if the other party really insisted that there was Winnie in the name of the Elixir Alliance, then even if he could prove his innocence afterwards, at least his reputation would be ruined. This guy was a classic example of someone who could not do anything right, but was more than capable of ruining things. He really couldn't ignore him. Protection fee? No, no, no. We are the dignified medicine sect. How could we do such a lowly and shameless thing like collecting protection fee? Diao Huanshan shook his head repeatedly and raised his eyebrows. Didn't I tell you from the beginning? I came to you today to cooperate with you. What kind of cooperation? Linny asked without a change in expression. It's very simple. The medicine sect can provide you with some elixirs and let you participate in the distribution. This is a big pie that fell from the sky. What do you think, shopkeeper? Of course, as long as you choose to cooperate with us, you naturally don't have to worry about the Elixir Alliance's inspection. Diao Huanshan tempted him, using the Elixir Alliance as a threat to make my Tiandan Pavilion do the distribution for the medicine sect. This is his wishful thinking. Then, shopkeeper Diao, if we help you distribute the elixirs, how much will the purchase price be lower than your normal selling price? Linny asked seriously. Of course we will sell them to you at the normal selling price. Diao Huanshan instantly laughed. Seeing that Linny's expression was a little uneasy, he analyzed the pros and cons and said, Think about it, shopkeeper. For a small elixir shop like yours, when business is not good, you can only starve. But if business is good, it's very easy to run out of stock. This is something that will ruin your reputation. As long as you choose to cooperate with the medicine sect, you won't have to worry about this risk. Moreover, you can handle the inspection from the Elixir Alliance. This is a great thing. Don't you understand? Chapter 41:17. Profit? How can there be no profit? Other than the elixirs that the famous medicine sect will give you, I didn't say that you can't sell your own elixirs. Of course, you must give us half of the profit. I'm sure you understand that, shopkeeper? Diao Huanshan laughed proudly without fear. Hearing this, Lin Yi was instantly angered and amused. Helping the famous medicine sect sell elixirs for free, not only did he not earn any difference in price and hard work, but he also wanted a share of the profit from his own elixirs. It was rare to see someone this shameless. "Oh, I've understood everything. I'm sorry that I can't accept the cooperation that shopkeeper Diao has proposed. Please leave, shopkeeper Diao," Linny said indifferently and gestured for him to leave. Although Jiao Huanshan used the Elixir Alliance's inspection as a threat, Lin Yi didn't take it to heart. Anyway, there was nothing wrong with his elixirs. No matter how they inspected them, they couldn't make something out of nothing. Moreover, if something really happened, Kai Zhongyang and the others would definitely not stand by and watch. Kai Zhongyang was the assistant shopkeeper of the Five Elements Commerce. In terms of status and authority, he couldn't be worse than the assistant shopkeeper of the famous medicine sect. Moreover, he had the legendary god, the will of heaven, behind him. What? Diao Huanshan thought that Linny had already recognized the reality and could only endure the humiliation to survive. He didn't expect Lin Yi's attitude to suddenly become so unyielding. He was instantly shocked and angry. "I won't cooperate with the famous medicine sect. Shopkeeper Diao, please leave. Do you understand now?" Lin Yi repeated with an indifferent expression. Good, good. You better think carefully. If you don't cooperate with the famous medicine sect, don't think about doing your business in peace. I want you to never have a foothold in the Middle Island market. Diao Huanshan said fiercely, feeling humiliated and angry. He didn't hide anything when he said that. In an instant, all the customers in the shop were stunned. They looked at each other, and then looked at Lin Yi with sympathy. Lin Yi's eyes turned cold, but before he could speak, a cold voice suddenly sounded at the door. "I haven't been out for years, so I never knew that Zhongdao has become a place where people bully others. Do you still have to look at other people's faces when doing business in Middle Island Market?" As the voice spoke, the will of heaven strode in with his head held high. Diao Huanshan was stunned. He felt that this person looked familiar, but he couldn't remember who it was. However, he had long believed that a small shop like Tiandan Pavilion couldn't have a strong background. Even if it did, it couldn't be compared to the famous medicine sect. He didn't know where this guy came from, but he dared to talk to the famous medicine sect's assistant shopkeeper like that. Diao Huanshan naturally wouldn't let it go. He immediately snorted and said, "Humph, this isn't called bullying, it's called working together. But if you insist on saying that this is bullying and twisting the truth, then I can't do anything about it. After all, the mouth is on your body. I don't have to rush to clean up after you." Diao Huanshan was fearless. He was still proud of his sharp eloquence when he suddenly heard someone in the crowd say in surprise, "Huh? Isn't that the Deputy Island Lord of Heaven?" "That's right. I was fortunate enough to meet him many years ago." "It really seems like the Deputy Island Lord of Heaven?" "It can't be. Didn't the rumors say that the Deputy Island Lord of Heaven went berserk and couldn't move his meridians anymore? How could he be standing here in one piece?" "Yeah, it's said that he hasn't shown himself in front of people for many years. It can't be him, right?" The will of heaven didn't care about the crowd's suspicions. He just looked at Diao Huanshan coldly and waved his hand. A cold and overbearing true qi instantly burst forth. Before Diao Huanshan could react, he felt his body shake, and his whole body was suddenly slapped away. "Since he doesn't want to work together, then I'll send you on your way, lest you dirty the Tiandan Pavilion," the will of heaven said coldly. With his level, he didn't care to talk nonsense with this kind of person. Since he was a vicious dog, he would just beat him up. Bang! Diao Huanshan fell heavily in the middle of the street, sprawled on the ground. He was so dizzy from the fall that he couldn't get up for a long time. The two burly men who came with him instantly looked ferocious and wanted to attack the will of heaven. However, the will of heaven just gave them a simple look, and they were so scared that they almost peed their pants. They were drenched in cold sweat and didn't dare to move. The will of heaven didn't hit him hard. Although Diao Huanshan was in a sorry state from the fall, his injuries weren't that serious. He looked at the will of heaven up and down in shock and fear. After a moment, Diao Huanshan suddenly quivered. He finally realized that the person in front of him was actually the legendary figure who had shaken Middle Island in the past. He was the only person in history who could become the Deputy Island Lord in the nascent Soul Realm. He was the powerful person who could instantly kill people with a higher cultivation level. The will of heaven, In the blink of an eye, Jiao Huanshan and his two subordinates were really scared to the point of peeing their pants. He had just spoken rudely to the will of heaven. What the F***ck had happened to him today? Jiao Huanshan was terrified. He knew that he had made a big mistake, but he didn't know how to fix it. He then heard the will of heaven continue. Today is the opening day of my sister, Tian Chan's Tiandan Pavilion, so I don't want to start a massacre. I hope that some people will know their place and don't come here to look for trouble. Otherwise, I don't mind stretching my arms and legs a little. As soon as he said this, the onlookers immediately started discussing. Even those who were suspicious at first could now confirm that this person was the legendary the will of heaven. They didn't expect a small Tiandan pavilion to have such a strong background. Even if some people guessed that it had a backer, they would never have thought that it was actually opened by the sister of the Deputy Island Master of Middle Island, the will of heaven. This backer was a complete mess. As for Jiao Huanshan, who had been slapped out of the door, he was scared to the point of peeing his pants. He didn't dare to stay in this place any longer, so he hurriedly ran for his life. The unexpected appearance of the will of heaven immediately triggered a panic-buying frenzy among the onlookers. Even on this heaven stage island, celebrity effects were important. The will of heaven was a typical living signboard. With the reputation of the Deputy Island Master of Middle Island as a guarantee, everyone was more assured about the quality of the elixirs. More and more customers came after hearing the news. In less than a day, the elixirs on the display shelves were constantly being snatched up by people. The other benefit of the will of heaven's reputation was that those who had other ideas didn't dare to have any crooked thoughts anymore. Even if these people coveted the beauty of Tianshan and Sydney, they definitely didn't dare to act rashly in the store. Chapter 41:18. On the first day of business, more than half of the 180 elixirs that were prepared were sold. The sales volume even reached an exaggerated 6-digit number. Even Linny himself didn't expect this result. After all, this wasn't an auction. It was just a normal store operation. No one would be stupid enough to bid a high price. Moreover, Lin Yi even lowered the price proactively. It was already very shocking that the sales volume could reach 6 digits on the first day. Even many big chambers of commerce couldn't reach this level. Of course, the will of heaven also played a part in this. If it wasn't for his appearance that caused the rush to buy the elixirs, or if it wasn't because of his existence that attracted more and more customers, the sales volume would probably be reduced by more than half. The sales volume reached 6 digits on the first day of business. Lin Yi and the others were only surprised. On the contrary, Kai Zhongyang, who was a standard industry insider, almost couldn't catch his breath when he heard about it. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak for a long time. Young Hero Lin, do you know that our 5 Elements Commerce has the strong backing of Zhongdao Alchemy Hall? How much was the sales volume on the first day of business? Kai Zhongyang asked with a strange expression. How much? Lin Yi and the others asked curiously. 5 Elements Commerce was undoubtedly the #1 chamber of commerce. Its data could almost be regarded as the highest record in the industry. 96,000 spiritual jade. Kai Zhongyang smiled bitterly and said, as far as I know, this has already left all the other top chambers of commerce far behind. It's an unprecedented record. But compared to young Hero Lin's Tiandan Pavilion, TSK. Hearing that, Lin Yi and the others couldn't help but look at each other. Building Tiandan Pavilion to buy elixirs was originally just a temporary idea. The purpose was only for Tianshan and Sydney to have a foothold in Zhongdao. That was all. However, he never imagined that he would accidentally lose to a leviathan like the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce. If these words didn't come from the mouth of Kai Zhongyang, the vice manager of the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce, no one would dare believe it. Brother Lin Yi is a genius. Is it strange that he is better than 5 Elements Commerce? In my opinion, it's very normal. Although your master, Old Man Zhang, is also an unreasonable freak, he really isn't suited to do business. If he hadn't established the pill hall in advance and made a name for himself, I reckon that your 5 Elements Commerce wouldn't even be able to earn a fraction of this Tiandan Pavilion's profit on the first day of business. The will of heaven laughed as he listened. That's true. Although the grade isn't high, With so many top-grade pills, it's not surprising that they sold at such a high price. Ho Guanqi nodded and asked curiously, "By the way, little friend Lin Yi, where did you get these supreme-grade pills from?" "That's right. I've been wanting to ask this question for a long time." Previously, during the auction in the extreme North Island, Hong Zhong was clearly being ganged up on by others and had no way out. In the end, he suddenly took out more than 100 top-grade medicinal pills. This matter has already become a legend in the industry. Could it be related to you, young hero Lin? Kai Zhongyang was equally curious. They couldn't be blamed for being curious. Outsiders might just be shocked, thinking that Zhongdao's pill haul had this kind of strength, but they didn't usually show it. But these two, as Zhang Liju's disciples, core members of the pill haul, had a much clearer understanding of this than outsiders. Unless Zhang Liju personally made them, otherwise, even if the entire Zhongdao pill haul gathered their strength, they wouldn't be able to take out so many supreme-grade pills in a short amount of time, unless they used their strategic storage. I won't hide it from you two seniors. Actually, I'm also an alchemist. I made these pills myself, Linny said with a slight smile. Ah, really? Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other, shocked. Master Lin, you're really a refiner? A refiner who can make large amounts of supreme-grade pills? And with such amazing medical skills, don't we have reason to suspect that you're our Sifu in disguise? Even in the Hall of Elixirs, where there were many elite refiners, it was rare for them to be able to concoct high-quality elixirs. Someone like Lin Yi, a dual practitioner of medicine and elixir, with such a high level of proficiency in both, seemed to be the only one in the entire world who could do so. Zhang Liju. Haha ho Kai, you two really have sharp eyes. Come, come, come. Hurry up and kowtow to your Sifu. The Will of Heaven laughed and teased them. Hee, I don't think it's Sifu himself, but a disciple he took in outside? Other than Sifu, I can't think of anyone else who could raise a genius like Linny. Ho Guanqi laughed as well. Linny couldn't help but laugh inwardly. Ho Guanqi had guessed it correctly, but before he met Zhang Liju, this cheap Sifu, he couldn't admit it. He just smiled and didn't say anything. After a while, Kai Zhongyang suddenly remembered what happened in the day and asked, I heard that Diao Huanshan from Yao sect came to cause trouble? He and Ho Guanqi were busy preparing for the auction and only came to support in the afternoon. They didn't bump into Diao Huanshan. Otherwise, with their status, if Diao Huanshan was present, he would definitely be able to recognize them, and there probably wouldn't have been such a commotion during the day. That's right, he threatened me with that Elixir Alliance's inspection, insisting that I distribute Yao sect's elixirs for free and even take half of our profits. At this point, Linny frowned slightly. Elder Kai, just how much power does that Elixir Alliance have? If they do something, will it affect my Tiandan Pavilion's business, or even directly force my Tiandan Pavilion to close down? If it's just a small elixir shop without a strong background, Elixir Alliance does indeed have the power to force it to close down. But don't worry, young Master Lin. With me here, you don't need to care about this Elixir Alliance at all. Just treat it like a fart. Kai Zhongyang curled his lips in disdain. So you're saying that Five Elements Commerce has a lot of power in that Elixir Alliance, right? Linny asked. With the Heavenly Executioner acting as a guarantor, he was actually not worried about this matter. Any sensible person would not offend a legendary master like the Vice Island Master for the sake of a small elixir store. This was simply not in line with the logic of a businessman. Chapter 41:19. On the contrary, we, Five Elements Commerce, have nothing to do with the Elixir Alliance. Kai Zhongyang shook his head. Wah. Linny paused and asked curiously, didn't they say that all the merchants selling elixirs in Zhongdao have to accept the Elixir Alliance's supervision? In theory, yes, but Five Elements Commerce is an exception. You might not know this, Master Lin, but when Five Elements Commerce was first established, there was no Elixir Alliance. However, because our Five Elements Chamber of Commerce is like the sun in the sky, many other elixir merchants can only use this excuse to isolate us and spread rumors that the quality of our Five Elements Chamber of Commerce's elixirs is not up to standard. They want to use this to fight against us. Kai Zhongyang curled his lips in a mocking manner. And the result? Lin Yi and the others asked. In the end, my master only said one sentence. As long as you have proof, I'll give the Elixir God title to the Elixir Alliance. But, can any of you afford it? Kai Zhongyang imitated Zhang Liju's tone and smiled in disdain. After that, we didn't even need to do anything. The customers all started boycotting the Elixir Alliance, and in the end, they had no choice but to come to my master and beg for forgiveness. Only then did the storm die down. Haha, a bunch of clowns. Lin Yi couldn't help but smile, but in his heart, he was amazed. His cheap master's influence and rallying power in Sky-class Island was really not to be underestimated. One sentence from him could decide the direction of the market, and this wasn't something that could be done with just power and position. So, although Five Elements commerce isn't in the Elixir Alliance, as long as we say the word, they won't even dare to fart. I'll just talk to them, and I'm sure they won't come to Tiandan Pavilion anymore. Kai Zhongyang smiled and guaranteed. All right, I'll be troubling you then, Elder Kai. Lin Yi nodded. With the double protection of the will of heaven and Kai Zhongyang, normal people with discerning eyes would not feel uncomfortable visiting them again. By the way, I see that although you have a lot of top-grade medicinal pills here, the highest grade is only 4th grade. This old man suggests that you add some high-grade medicinal pills that are 5th grade and above. Of course, there will be people who will buy Tier 3 and Tier 4 pills. However, this is just the opening. If we continue to stay at this level, we will lack competitiveness compared to other large pill vendors. It will be detrimental to our long-term development, Kai Zhongyang suggested after some consideration. Actually, I've thought about this problem carefully, but I don't have any elixirs above the 5th grade on hand, and I've never refined one before, so I can only take it slow. Lin Yi shook his head helplessly. Junior brother Kai is the vice shopkeeper of the Chamber of Commerce. It's not good for him to come out and help directly. How about I find a reason to get some from the pill hall? As long as the quantity isn't too big, it shouldn't be a problem. Ho Guanqi interrupted. Thank you for your kind intentions, seniors, but we don't need them right now. After all, we've just opened. These Tier 4 elixirs should be able to last for a while. Lin Yi quickly waved his hand to reject. Letting Ho Guanqi get elixirs from the pill hall as support was a simple method, but even if he used Spirit Jade to trade fairly, it would be easy for others to use it against him. If Zhang Dongjue found out about this, he would be labeled as a traitor. Even if Ho Guanqi was Zhang Liju's disciple in name, he wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Lin Yi didn't want him to take this risk because of him. Seeing this, Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other and didn't say anything else. It was just as Lin Yi was worried about. The risk was not small. At that moment, the will of heaven suddenly spoke up. You guys really can't see clearly. Isn't this simple? Lin Yi bro is an elixir refiner himself. Xiao Ho, Xiao Kai, you guys get him some Tier 5 elixir recipes and materials and let him make it himself. That way, people won't gossip, right? Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang heard this and their eyes lit up. They clapped and praised Lin Yi. Because he was too young, they subconsciously neglected the fact that this guy was a freak who could make large amounts of Tier 5 elixirs. Even if Lin Yi had never refined a Tier 5 elixir before, since he could refine a Tier 4 elixir, then a Tier 5 elixir shouldn't be a problem. Ho Guanqi immediately took out 3 elixir recipes from his arms and handed them to Lin Yi. My little friend Lin Yi, these 3 elixir recipes are all Tier 5 elixir recipes. I'll ask someone to send the materials over later. You can take some time to try it out. If you can succeed, that would be great. Then I won't stand on ceremony. Thank you, Senior Ho. Lin Yi didn't refuse. This was exactly what he needed. Besides, the other party was his senior brother anyway. He didn't need to be too polite. He just needed to find a way to repay him in the future. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang told Lin Yi a lot of their experiences in refining Tier 5 elixirs. It wasn't until the sky was dark and they finished dinner that they left with the will of heaven. As for Lin Yi, Tianshan, and Sydney, now that they had Tiandan Pavilion, which belonged to them, they naturally didn't need to go to 5 Elements Commerce with Kai Zhongyang. After a busy day, he let the 2 girls go back to their rooms to rest. Lin Yi began to refine Tier 5 elixirs overnight. Although he had never tried it before, He felt that it shouldn't be a big problem with the Shinnon Cauldron, an automatic alchemy artifact. Lin Yi took out one of the Tier 5 elixir recipes and entered it into the tablet computer. The Shinnon medicine cauldron immediately began to automatically analyze the alchemy curve. Although the waiting time was longer than when he refined the foundation establishment pill, the results showed that everything was normal. There were no accidents. Immediately, Lin Yi began to refine the Tier 5 elixir according to the instructions of the alchemy curve. The process lasted for 2 hours before it came to an abrupt end. The final result was a failure. Looking at the pile of black residue in the medicine cauldron, Lin Yi was stunned for a long time. Since Han Jingjing helped him modify the Shinnon medicine cauldron, he had never failed, especially after the Heaven Stage Island. This was the first time. However, after all, it was the first time he tried to refine a Tier 5 elixir. Lin Yi was mentally prepared for failure. Fortunately, this failure didn't affect the Shinnon medicine cauldron itself. Otherwise, if there was a furnace explosion and the Shinnon medicine cauldron was destroyed, he would really cry. Chapter 41:20. Sure enough, after 6 hours, Lin Yi finally succeeded in refining the first 5th grade medicinal pill. The quality was superior, but there was still a gap from the best grade. However, Lin Yi believed that as long as the medicinal cauldron corrected it a few more times, it would be a matter of time. In the next few days, the business of Tiandan Pavilion obviously declined a lot compared to the first day of opening, and it gradually began to calm down. This was actually not strange at all. On the first day of opening, many people were attracted by the liveliness. It was rare to find so many best-grade medicinal pills, coupled with the living signboard of the will of heaven, which led to the scene of people scrambling to buy. Although elixirs were also consumables, they were not like food and drink. Most cultivators might not even consume a single elixir in a month. After these people bought the elixirs, they would not need them for a short period of time. Therefore, the decline in sales of Tiandan Pavilion was also reasonable. In fact, even the 5 Elements commerce in the past could not be as popular as the opening of a new store every day. It was normal for sales to fall by more than half. However, after all, there were still a lot of best-grade medicinal pills on the display shelves, which naturally had a good attraction and appeal. Compared to the bleak situation of other shops that were deserted, the business of Tiandan Pavilion was still quite good, which made many people in the industry jealous and envious. It was not as full of guests as the first day. Sydney alone could handle the business in the store, which was just right for Lin Yi and Tian Chan. Long. Wind. During the time of learning to refine medicinal pills, if even the two of them were forced to appear together, resulting in no time to refine medicinal pills, then it would really not be far from a shortage of medicinal pills. During this period of time, there was only one thing that Lin Yi had to do every day, which was to concentrate on refining medicinal pills. Not only did he have to try to refine more 5th-grade medicinal pills, but he also had to accumulate 4th-grade medicinal pills for future storage. However, the freshly made 5th-grade medicinal pills in Lin Yi's hands, he did not directly put them on the display shelves for sale. After all, Tiandan Pavilion had just opened. The best 4th-grade medicinal pills were still attractive enough, so he was not in a hurry to introduce 5th-grade medicinal pills. As for another more important reason, it was the news that Lin Yi learned from Kai Zhongyang that the Zhongdao auction would officially start in 10 days. Therefore, Lin Yi planned to hoard these 5th-grade medicinal pills and auction them together in the name of Tiandan Pavilion. If he wanted to promote the reputation of Tiandan Pavilion as soon as possible, this was a heaven-made opportunity that could not be missed. In addition, during this period of time, Lin Yi received another piece of good news from Kai Zhongyang. The Heart Devourer grass he'd been waiting for was finally here. There were 5 of them in total, and while it wasn't as many as Ning Shuefei's 10 portions, Lin Yi still managed to produce 8 ultimate quality foundation building pills. The success rate was even more ridiculous than last time. Apart from the excellent quality of the 5 heart-devouring exquisite grasses, it was also because they were freshly collected. The shorter the storage time, the lesser the loss of medicinal properties. Naturally, the better the effect of alchemy. although it was unexpected that 8 of them had appeared. But it was reasonable. He had the 8 supreme grade pills in his hands, but he didn't need them for the time being. After all, he'd only just reached the peak of the late phase of foundation building with the pills, and if he kept using them recklessly, he'd be in trouble. It was easy to cause the foundation to be unstable, and the loss outweighed the gain. However, Linny had no use for it at the moment. For Tianchan and Shueli, who had low strength, these supreme grade foundation building pills were just timely help. With their current realm, as long as they consumed 1 supreme grade foundation building pill together with the bottleneck breaking pill, they would be able to break through and level up. This unexpected surprise shocked the 2 women for a long time. With their relationship with Lin Yi, they could not say that they were not familiar with Lin Yi. However, they felt that Lin Yi was like Doraemon. From time to time, he would take out a big surprise to surprise them. Even now, they were not sure where the limits of this man of theirs were. Lin Yi personally took care of the business of Tiandan Pavilion. The 2 women, Tianchan and Sydney, happily took the medicinal pills and went into seclusion to break through. As for the remaining 6 foundation-building pills, Lin Yi also left them with them, so that they could continue to take them to level up after consolidating their realm. To put it bluntly, as long as he could find the heart-devouring exquisite grass, Lin Yi could refine the foundation-building pill at any time. However, if he let Tianchan do it, not to mention whether it could guarantee the foundation-building pill, there was a high chance that it would fail. After all, the foundation-building pill was not an ordinary product, and the difficulty of refining it was quite high. Dan Hall, Zheng Garden. Grandpa, you told me last time that you would find a way to make grandson's wish come true. But now, not only can you not find a chance, but you also let Tianchan move out to set up her own business. What should we do? Zhang Tianchu's position was getting more stable these days, and he took the opportunity to complain to Zheng Dongjue. The more he couldn't eat something, the more he coveted it. In the past, he could pester Tianchan every day, so he had the patience to wait for a while longer. But now that Tianchan moved out, watching the cooked duck fly away, this kind of feeling was really unbearable for ordinary people. What was even more unbearable was that Tianchan could move out, and it was actually his grandfather who personally approved it. This made him, who only wanted to play with his sister-in-law, how could he endure it? Humph, you only know how to revolve around women all day long. What great prospects can you have like this? Zhang Dongjue couldn't help but stare and scold. Compared to the dead Zheng Tianjie, Zheng Tianchu was much worse in all aspects. Helping him to be the successor was actually quite risky, but Zheng Dongjue had no choice. The other younger generation of the Zheng family was even worse than Zheng Tianchu. If he didn't choose Zheng Tianchu, who else could he choose? Grandpa, don't be angry. Actually, grandson is only thinking about Tianchan to be able to inherit my cousin's will. It's not that I don't want to improve, it's just to solve an obsession. Grandpa, didn't you also say that in the process of cultivation, there can't be obsession? Zhang Tianchu quibbled with his neck shrinking. Zhang Dongjue looked at him resentfully. How could Zheng Tianchu's little thoughts escape his eyes? However, it was a harmless matter for a man to be lustful. He was also at this age. As long as he could get his wish, he naturally wouldn't be so obsessed in the future. Let's wait and see first. Don't act rashly during this period of time. I still haven't figured out how well the will of heaven has recovered. However, last time when Tiandan Pavilion opened, he showed his hand in front of everyone and scared shopkeeper Diao away. Zhang Dongjue comforted. Chapter 41-21. It's only been a few days. His strength hasn't fully recovered, that's for sure. But with his domineering strength as the top nascent soul cultivator, even if he only recovered half of his strength, he's still a monster that can't be underestimated. It's the stupidest thing to recklessly clash with him. Zhang Dongjue warned sternly, based on his performance this time, he's still very considerate of Tianchan. If you provoke Tianchan at this time, if he wants to kill you, even I can't save you. Zhang Tianchu was shocked. He only wanted to get Tianchan, but he never thought about this. If it was someone else, they might not dare to do anything to him because of Zheng Dongjue. But if it was the will of heaven, he might not give his grandfather face. Compared to his own life, no matter how great the temptation of his sister-in-law, Tian Shan, was, Zhang Tianchu could only choose to endure it for now. He nodded helplessly. All right then, I'll do whatever Grandpa says. Don't worry. Even if Tian Shan moves out of the pill hall, she's still the daughter-in-law of the Zhang family. What's yours will never escape. Just wait and see. Zhang Dongjue and Zhang Tianchu looked at each other and smiled sinisterly. Medicine Sect, Middle Island Market. Diao Huanshan respectfully sat opposite a middle-aged man with a white face and no beard. This person was the shopkeeper of their medicine sect, Tong Yangsua. Shopkeeper Tong, you must help me this time. In order to take in this small Tiandan pavilion, I've lost all my face. I'm doing this for our medicine sect, and it concerns the image of our entire medicine sect. You can't just sit back and do nothing, Diao Huanshan complained gloomily. Relying on their strong position in the Elixir Alliance, they went to take in this newly opened small elixir shop and completely turned it into their puppet. This was the medicine sect's usual method of expansion. This method was tried and tested. Ordinary small shops didn't dare to go against the medicine sect at all. Because they didn't have a strong background, no other powerful figures and forces would stand up for them and offend the medicine sect. It had always been none of their business. Hang it up high. However, they did not expect that this time they would kick an iron plate in front of this unprepossessing Tiandan pavilion. The vice island master of Middle Island, the will of heaven, was such a tyrannical super expert. Not to mention their medicine sect, even their backer did not dare to easily provoke him. But no matter what, Diao Huanshan couldn't swallow this humiliation. He was thrown out in front of so many people. If he didn't find a way to get back at them, how could he survive in the Middle Island market in the future? Don't even think about raising your head when you walk out of the door. Brother Jiao, you've really been wrong this time. Whether it's me or the medicine sect, we'll keep this matter in mind. You can rest assured about this. Tong Yangsua comforted him with a stylized smile. Diao Huanshan frowned when he heard this. Something didn't seem right. What was the use of remembering it? Manager Tong, I've thought about it carefully these past few days. We really can't afford to provoke someone like the will of heaven, but if we just try to fix up Tiandan Pavilion, and as long as we don't go about it, we can use some small tricks to squeeze it. After all, the will of heaven isn't an expert. He won't come forward for such a small matter, right? Diao Huanshan didn't give up and suggested, Brother Diao, haven't you paid attention to the rumors outside these past few days? Kai Zhongyang from Five Elements Commerce has already greeted the Elixir Alliance. Tiandan Pavilion, their Elixir Hall, and Five Elements Commerce are all on the same side. If we use insidious tricks to deal with them, we'll have to bear the consequences. Tong Yangsua looked at Diao Huanshan in surprise. Even Five Elements Commerce came forward? Diao Huanshan choked instantly. Unwillingness was written all over his face. Although Tiandan Pavilion was Tian Chan's property, even Five Elements Commerce came forward to protect it. This was really unexpected. Deputy Island Master the will of heaven wasn't enough. Now, Five Elements Commerce came, and it even involved the Elixir Hall behind it. How could this small Tiandan Pavilion have such a big background? So, although this Tiandan Pavilion is small, it really isn't a good place to provoke. Our boss behind the scenes told us to stop for a while and avoid the sharp edge for now. We'll wait and see what happens. Tong Yangsua conveyed the order. All right, I'll follow the order. Diao Huanshan nodded helplessly. Then, he didn't forget to complain. But the boss is really too much. That Tian Chan came from the Elixir Hall, and they can't even interfere. Sure, Brother Diao, be careful with your words. Tong Yangsua was shocked. He hurriedly gestured for him to keep quiet, then said, There's no use complaining. Let's focus on the auction event first. It's going to start in 2 days. As far as I know, that Tiandan Pavilion seems to have already registered to participate. Are you serious? What can they auction with that little property of theirs? Do they think they're awesome because they have the support of the will of heaven? Diao Huanshan was shocked when he heard that. For businesses, the auction event of Middle Island had always been qualified to participate in the auction. Ordinary small businesses couldn't take out anything decent. They didn't even have the qualification to register, let alone take the opportunity to earn money and spirit jades. They probably want to use this opportunity to make a name for themselves. Didn't you say that they put out quite a lot of fourth-grade elixirs? Although it's a little low-level in Middle Island, it's still barely enough to register. Tong Yangsua then smiled coldly and said, "But this is good. It gives us a chance to suppress them openly. Let's hurry up and prepare. This time, we can't let them get what they want. We have to beat them." Yes, yes. This way, even the will of heaven and five elements commerce can't say anything. Diao Huanshan nodded in agreement. A few days later, the auction event of Middle Island officially began. As the top auction event of Middle Island and even the five big islands of Heaven stage, its specifications were naturally unparalleled. This could be seen from the venue alone. It was the center of Middle Island, the Middle Cauldron Mountain. Those who could enter Middle Pinnacle Mountain either had a strong background from a super sect or had extraordinary strength. As the saying went, there were no weaklings. This was the natural threshold of Middle Island's auction event. The specific location of the auction was on a very famous mountain peak in Middle Pinnacle Mountain. It was called 10,000 Sky Peak. On the platform of the mountain peak that had a circumference of a few miles, there were countless huge rocks scattered. Because the huge rocks were of strange shapes, each one was different. When one looked up, one could see countless shapes of the sky. That was how the name 10,000 Sky Peak came about. Chapter 41-22. This time, although Tiandan Pavilion had registered to participate in the auction, the representatives were the will of heaven, who had recently returned to the martial world and received much attention, as well as Tian Chan. As for Lin Yi, he appeared alone with Kai Zhongyang because he planned to bid for some treasures in this rare auction event. According to his past experience, it was very likely that he would offend some people, and it was also possible that he would be coveted after he got the treasures. If Lin Yi appeared as the shopkeeper of Tiandan Pavilion, he might bring trouble to Tiandan Pavilion. Pavilion A12, please follow me. Reception messengers were arranged everywhere in the venue to serve the many big shots present. Not only did they lead the way, but they also provided one-to-one service for all matters related to the auction. They were extremely thoughtful and experienced. It was the first time that Lin Yi had come to the 10,000 Sky Peak. Naturally, he was secretly surprised by the rare spectacle of the strange stone pavilions. Kai Zhongyang, who was beside him, explained with a smile, "There are a total of hundreds of pavilions and tea houses here, and they are divided into 4 grades from good to bad. During the auction, they have always been allocated according to the strength and background of the participants. Those who can get Pavilion A12 can be counted on one hand." Lin Yi nodded. Although Kai Zhongyang could not be compared with the real big shots of the sects in terms of strength and status, he represented the giant 5 elements commerce this time, so it was reasonable that he was arranged to Pavilion A12. At the same time, Lin Yi turned his head subconsciously and found that not far away, the will of heaven was leading Tian Chan to Pavilion A9. His ranking was even higher than the two of them. However, on second thought, even though the current Heavenly Dan Pavilion was still not up to par, it could not withstand the great reputation of a legendary expert like Tian Xing. As the once all-powerful Vice Island Master of Middle Island, it was not strange for him to be valued so highly by the organizers now that he had recovered from his injuries. Under the guidance of the reception messenger, Lin Yi followed Kai Zhongyang to Pavilion A12. Because the position was much higher than other ordinary pavilions, the view was excellent. It was also very close to the auction booth in the center. It was indeed a rare good position. He chatted leisurely with Kai Zhongyang as he watched the crowd enter. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. This scene, this grandeur. The auction at the extreme North Island paled quite a bit compared to this. After a while, the auction of Middle Island officially began. When the auctioneer appeared on the auction booth in the center, everyone's eyes lit up. It was a graceful and beautiful woman. She wore a light and translucent white dress, and the hot and exquisite wonderful curves were hidden in it. The dress swayed gently with the breeze, and the beautiful scene that flashed by intentionally or unintentionally was simply fascinating. In particular, this woman was not like those young girls who were 17 or 18 years old, but about 30 years old. Her whole body exuded a mature charm that made any man unable to resist. Beside her, there was another blonde girl who was similarly good-looking but dressed in revealing clothes. She was holding a silver plate as she stood by the side. She complimented her dignified and intellectual appearance and was very pleasing to the eye. This scene really made all the men present swallow their saliva. The organizers could be said to have taken great pains. Just the two women standing on the stage had already attracted the attention of all the people present. Only Lin Yi was quite indifferent to this. With so many beautiful female confidants, his resistance to beautiful women had long been far beyond ordinary people. He came to participate in the auction, not to see beautiful women. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's auction of Middle Island officially begins. Let's look at the first auction item. Although this female auctioneer looked dignified and holy, her tone and voice were very coquettish. If you paid attention, you could even find that she gently licked her tongue seductively. But Lin Yi's attention was not on her. His eyes fell on the silver plate of the blonde girl next to her. He opened the red cloth above and revealed a weapon that looked like a knife. The first auction item is the meteor blade provided by the rich and powerful families. This is a weapon of the foundation establishment stage. Its blade is as thin as a wing, and after infusing it with true qi, its speed is like a meteor. It is unavoidable and indestructible. It is the first choice of many close combat masters. The base price is 3,000 spirit jade. The female auctioneer introduced with confidence. This meteor blade looks not bad. Lin Yi secretly praised it, but he didn't mean to buy it. Although he was short of weapons of the foundation establishment stage, the king of junk had already cast half of the weapons. At this time, it would not make much sense to get a meteor blade. After all, weapons were different from elixirs. They could not be bought and used. It would take a lot of time to specially practice them before they could be used in actual combat. However, although Lin Yi didn't want it, there were many others who were interested. After all, the appearance of this meteor blade looked very good. 3,100 spiritual jades. Someone immediately shouted out a bid. In this auction, every bid must be at least 100 spirit jade, so this could only be regarded as a test. 3,200 spirit jade. Someone immediately raised the price. 3,500 spirit jade. Then someone was not willing to be outdone. After a short while, under the continuous bidding of the female auctioneer, the price had been raised to 5,500 spirit jade. Lin Yi, who was watching coldly, also found a pattern. These people who bid were concentrated in the Pavilion D, which was the lowest area of the auction. This was not surprising. People who could come to the auction of the Middle Island were all big shots with deep backgrounds. Those who were interested in a weapon of the Foundation Establishment stage must only be in the Foundation Establishment stage. Of course, they could only be regarded as the lowest existence here. In the end, this meteor blade was won by someone at the price of 6,000 spirit jade. After the hammer was hammered, this meteor blade was directly handed to the person by the receptionist. At the same time, the person also took out the spirit jade card and swiped it on the spot. Seeing this, Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. This process was simple and direct enough. The typical payment and goods were settled on the spot. However, the spirit jade card, which was rare in the North Island, seemed to be very common in the Middle Island. Now, let's invite the second auction item. It is the highest grade spirit jade provided by the all-access auction. The base price is 1,000 spirit jade. Everyone, please look. The female auctioneer reached out to remove the covering cloth. Then, on the silver plate, a large super spirit jade appeared in front of everyone. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.